Hello guys. Welcome to Pika Fiction. So in this video, we will see what if a betrayed Ash became a ruthless trainer who hunted down his former friends. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The echo of betrayal. The wind on Mount Silver was a razor. It stripped warmth from the bone and carried the scent of ozone and ancient stone. Here, at the roof of the world, the air was thin and merciless, a fitting throne for a king who had forsaken his kingdom. Below a jagged spire of rock that clawed at the bruised purple sky, a figure stood cloaked in shadow and fury. His name, the one he had chosen, was Red. The one he had buried was Ash. He stood perfectly still, a statue carved from the mountain's own granite heart. Only his eyes moved, scanning the treacherous ascent. They were chips of obsidian, holding no light, reflecting only the desolate landscape before him. On his shoulder, a Pikachu sat, its form leaner, harder than the cheerful creature it had once been. A jagged scar sliced through its left eye, a permanent reminder of a day when loyalty had been paid for in blood and tears. Its small, black-tipped ears twitched, catching a sound on the wind long before a human could. "One," Red said, his voice a low rasp, unused to conversation. Pikachu's cheeks sparked, a low crackle of contained power that hummed in the frigid air. A moment later, a figure scrambled over a nearby ridge, breathing heavily, his face a mask of triumphant exhaustion. He was young, arrogant, clad in the expensive, clean gear of a trainer who had never truly struggled. His ace, a massive, muscle-bound Machamp, lumbered behind him, its forearms flexing with pride. "I found you," the challenger yelled, his voice thin against the gale. "They said you were a myth, the silent king of silver. I, Kato, the strongest trainer from the Fuchsia Academy, have come to claim your title." Red didn't turn. He didn't acknowledge the boy's proclamation. He simply tilted his head, a gesture that conveyed not curiosity, but utter dismissal. "You have come to lose." Kato bristled, his bravado stinging from the cold and the insult. "You think so? My Machamp has crushed every opponent from here to the Seafoam Islands. We will be the new legends. Machamp, show him our power, use bulk up." The Machamp roared, its voice a cannon blast against the stone. Its muscles swelled, glowing with a faint red aura of fighting energy. It slammed its fists together, a challenge that echoed across the desolate peaks. Red still didn't move. He looked at Pikachu. Their communication was beyond words now, a silent language of shared pain and purpose. Pikachu's scarred eye narrowed. "Kato of Fuchsia Academy," Red stated, the words flat and cold. "Your Machamp has a slight imbalance in its right leg, a consequence of over-relying on dynamic punch. You favor offense, leaving its lower body exposed for 0.8 seconds after every major assault. Your bond is shallow, built on pride, not trust. You have already lost." Kato's face went from pale to crimson. "Lies, Machamp, Stone Edge." The Machamp bellowed, its upper arms punching the frozen ground. Spires of glowing blue rock erupted from the earth, racing towards Red like sharpened teeth. They were fast, powerful, a move that would have shattered the defenses of a lesser opponent. Red made a single, sharp gesture. Agility. Pikachu became a blur of yellow lightning. It didn't just dodge the stone pillars. It danced between them, a fluid phantom moving with impossible grace. It used the sides of the rising stones as springboards, its movements so swift it seemed to be in multiple places at once. Kato's eyes widened, unable to track the small Pokémon. "Where did it, now?" Red commanded. From atop the final, tallest spire, Pikachu launched itself into the air. It wasn't shrouded in the gentle sparks of a normal electric attack. It was consumed by a maelstrom of violent, untamed electricity. The air itself seemed to scream as the sky darkened, the storm clouds drawn down from the heavens as if answering a call. This was no thunderbolt. This was something else entirely. This was judgment. Volt crash. Red's voice cut through the roar of the wind and the crackle of raw power. Pikachu descended like a meteor, a living bolt of golden fury. It struck the Machamp not with a simple shock, but with an explosion of kinetic and electrical energy. The super effective hit was irrelevant. The sheer force of the impact would have been enough. The Machamp, for all its bulk and power, was lifted from its feet. Its body convulsed, every muscle seizing at once, and it was thrown backward, slamming into the rock face with a sickening crunch. It slid to the ground, unconscious before it landed, its glowing aura extinguished. Silence returned, heavier and more profound than before. The only sound was the whistling wind. Kato stared, his mouth agape, his carefully constructed pride shattering like ice. His invincible partner, defeated in a single, terrifying blow. He looked from his fallen Pokémon to the cloaked figure, who hadn't so much as flinched. The fear that had been a distant thrill on his journey up the mountain was now a cold, suffocating presence in his throat. Red walked forward, his boots crunching on the frost-covered gravel. He stopped beside the fallen Machamp, giving it a cursory glance. "Your pride made you weak." He then turned his obsidian gaze to Kato, holding out a hand. "Your Pokédex." It wasn't a request. Kato fumbled with his belt, his hands shaking so badly he almost dropped the device. He held it out, and Red plucked it from his grasp. Red's thumb slid across the screen, his movements efficient and precise. He scanned Kato's data, his trainer profile, his battle records. Then he stopped. A news bulletin was displayed on the screen, a gaudy banner flashing with celebratory colors. Saffron City hosts the Masters of the Craft tournament, a reunion of legends. Sea champions, gym leaders, and top coordinators compete. Below the headline were pictures. A confident man in a doctor's coat, surrounded by adoring students. Brock. A woman with fiery orange hair, posing with a majestic Gyarados. Misty. The gallery scrolled on. A parade of ghosts from a life he had burned to the ground. May, Dawn, Iris, Salon, Clemont, Serena. All of them, smiling, celebrated. Pillars of a world that had cast him out. A muscle in Red's jaw tightened. The air around him grew colder, the latent power coiling in his gut turning frigid. He had spent years in this desolate wasteland, forging his pain into a weapon, sharpening his bonds with his Pokémon until they were unbreakable. He had hunted down and defeated every legend that dared to dwell on this mountain, from the mightiest Tyranitar to the elusive Larvitar, proving his strength to the only one who mattered. Himself. But the past was a stubborn weed, its roots deep and tangled. He pocketed Kato's Pokédex. "Leave," he commanded. "And tell them Red is coming." Kato didn't need to be told twice. He recalled his Machamp and scrambled away, slipping and sliding down the path in his haste to escape the suffocating presence of the man who was more mountain than human. Red watched him go, then turned his gaze east, towards Kanto. Towards Saffron City. Pikachu climbed from his shoulder onto his pack, nuzzling against the back of his neck, a silent question in its touch. "It is time," Red said, his voice a low promise carried on the wind. It's time they were reminded of what they threw away. The journey down from the mountain was a descent into a world that no longer felt like his. The wilderness, at least, was honest. The predators, the storms, the unforgiving terrain, they did not pretend to be your friend before they tried to break you. As he moved through the dense forests of the Viridian region, the Pokémon watched him from the shadows. They did not challenge him. His aura, a tightly controlled storm of power and resolve, was a warning more potent than any roar. A pack of mighty hyena, hunting on the path, took one look at the cloaked man and his scarred Pikachu and melted back into the undergrowth without a sound. He walked for days, sleeping under the stars, eating what he and his team could forage. The world of humans was a noise he preferred to avoid. But the memories, they were relentless. They followed him in the rustle of the leaves, in the reflection on a still pond, in the silence between heartbeats. And one memory, sharper than all the others, was a constant companion. The air in Professor Oak's lab was thick with a cloying, false sympathy. The Kalos League trophy, the one he had come so close to winning, felt like a lead weight in his gut. He had lost. He had given it everything, pushed his Pokémon and himself to their absolute limits, and it hadn't been enough. Alon had been better. That was a truth he could accept. A loss was a lesson, a chance to grow stronger. He had always believed that. They did not. Brock stood before him, his arms crossed, his usual easygoing smile replaced with a look of grim determination. "Ash, we need to talk." Misty was beside him, her expression even harder. "We've been talking for years. It's time for an intervention." They were all there. May, fidgeting with the hem of her gloves. Dawn, her usual bright demeanor snuffed out, refusing to meet his eyes. Iris stood with her Axew, her face a mask of condescending pity. "You're still such a kid, Ash." Sylvan nodded sagely beside her, a rehearsed speech no doubt on his lips. Clement, Bonnie, and even Serena, her blue eyes filled with a pained, misguided worry that hurt more than any anger could. "What's going on?" he had asked, his voice hoarse. Pikachu, on his shoulder, sensed the shift in the room and let out a low, questioning, "Pika." "It's about your dream," Brock had said, his voice gentle, which only made the words sharper. "This obsession with becoming a Pokémon master. We're your friends, Ash. And we can't stand by and watch you hurt yourself anymore." "Hurt myself?" Ash had repeated, bewildered. "I just competed in the league finals. I'm stronger than I've ever been. And you lost." Again, Misty cut in, her tone blunt. "Hoenn, Sinnoh, Unova, and now Kalos. Don't you see the pattern? You give these Pokémon your all, you fill their heads with dreams of being the strongest, and then you fail them. It's cruel." The words were a physical blow. He looked around the room, at the faces of the people he had traveled with, fought alongside, trusted with his life. He saw not concern, but judgment. They had already reached their verdict. We think it's time you gave up," Serena said, her voice trembling. "Find something else. Settle down. The world is bigger than just Pokémon battles." Rage, cold and sharp, pierced through his shock. "Give up. You, of all people." He directed at her, the memory of her own journey, her own refusal to quit, a bitter irony. "You don't get to say that to me." His anger only solidified their resolve. Professor Oak, who had been watching silently from the corner of the lab, finally spoke. "Ash, my boy, perhaps they have a point. Your bond with your Pokémon is remarkable, but this relentless pursuit, it's unsustainable." That was the moment the world broke. The professor, the man who had given him his start, who had been a mentor, a father figure. He was siding with them. "We've decided," Brock said, stepping forward, his hand outstretched. "It's for the best. Give us your Pokéballs, Ash. We'll make sure they go to good homes, to trainers who can give them a life beyond this endless, pointless fighting." Pikachu snarled, a sound of pure fury. Sparks flew from its cheeks. Ash stumbled back, clutching the belt where his partners, his family, resided. They were trying to take his Pokémon. They weren't trying to help him. They were trying to erase him. "No," he whispered, the word barely audible. "Don't be difficult," Misty sighed, pulling out a Staryu's Pokéball. "We're doing this for your own good." One by one, they reached for their own Pokémon. They were going to force him. His friends. His family. The betrayal was an absolute, a force that hollowed him out and filled the void with something dark and cold. He looked at Pikachu, and in that instant, a new bond was forged. Not of friendship and cheerful adventure, but of survival. As against the world. "Pikachu," he choked out. "Thunderbolt. All of it." He didn't need to say anything else. With a scream of rage and heartbreak, Pikachu unleashed a torrent of electricity that blew out every light in the lab. It wasn't aimed to injure, but to create chaos. In the flashing strobes of the emergency lights and the panicked shouts, Ash ran. He grabbed his backpack, shoved his Pokéballs inside, and sprinted for the door, Pikachu a golden blur on his shoulder. He burst out into the afternoon sun of Pallet Town, a place that had always been home, and now felt like enemy territory. He didn't look back. He just ran, the shouts of his former friends fading behind him, their words of, "Come back." And, "Don't be a fool," echoing not as pleas, but as the final twisting of the knife. The memory ended, as it always did, with the burning in his lungs and the feeling of being utterly, completely alone. Red stood on a hill overlooking Saffron City. The setting sun glinted off the golden skyscrapers, painting the metropolis in hues of fire and blood. He pulled the hood of his cloak lower, the shadows obscuring his face as he descended into the belly of the beast. Saffron City was a symphony of noise and light, a stark contrast to the profound silence of Mt. Silver. Crowds surged through the streets, their faces lit by holographic advertisements and the festive banners of the masters of the craft tournament. The air thrummed with excitement and anticipation. For Red, it was the sound of hypocrisy. He moved through the throng with an unnatural ease, an unseen current parting the sea of people around him. No one bumped into him. No one met his shadowed eyes. He was a void in the middle of the celebration. He found the registration hall for the tournament, a cavernous space beneath the grand stadium. The line was filled with eager young trainers and a few seasoned veterans, all chattering excitedly. When it was his turn, the clerk, a bored-looking woman with garish pink hair, didn't even look up from her screen. Name: Red. Home region: none. She finally glanced up, a flicker of annoyance in her eyes. Look, pal, I need something for the... She stopped. Her eyes widened slightly as she tried to peer into the shadows of his hood. Something she saw, or perhaps something she felt, made her swallow hard. The air around him felt heavy, charged. She quickly looked back at her screen. Right, Red. Fine. She typed it in. Entry granted. Your first match will be determined after the opening ceremony. Good luck. She pushed a trainer pass across the counter without another word, already eager for him to be gone. Red took the pass and walked away, melting back into the shadows of the Colosseum's corridors. He found a secluded spot high in the stands, overlooking the main arena, and waited. Time meant nothing to him. He was as patient as the stone of the mountain he called home. The opening ceremony began with a dazzling display of pyrotechnics and a thundering musical score. The announcer's voice, amplified to a godlike volume, boomed across the stadium. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the inaugural Masters of the Craft Tournament, where the greatest trainers from across the regions gather to showcase the true meaning of skill, power, and the bond between humans and Pokémon. A platform rose from the center of the field. On it stood the Masters. Lance, the Kanto champion, stood tall and proud. Cynthia of Sinnoh was there, her expression calm and analytical. And then he saw them. Brock, waving to the crowd, the esteemed professor. And Misty, the Cerulean gym leader, now hailed as the world's premier water-type mistress. She blew a kiss to her fans, her ego on full display. Red's hand, hidden in the folds of his cloak, clenched into a fist. The world celebrated them as paragons of the Pokémon-human bond. The irony was a poison in his veins. And now, the announcer bellowed, our first exhibition will be a showcase of pure aquatic grace and power. Please welcome the one, the only, Misty of Cerulean City. The crowd roared. Misty stepped forward, basking in the adoration. She held a Pokeball aloft. For my fans, I'll show you the untamable power of the sea. Before she could continue, a second voice cut through the stadium speakers. It was cold, clear, and utterly devoid of emotion. It silenced the cheering crowd in an instant. That power is not yours to command. Every head turned, trying to find the source of the voice. A lone figure was walking from the shadowy entrance of the arena onto the sun-drenched field. His dark cloak billowed behind him, and a scarred Pikachu was perched on his shoulder. The announcer sputtered, security. We have an unauthorized person on the field. Misty shielded her eyes, peering at the intruder. Who do you think you are? This is an invitation-only event. Red stopped in the center of the field, directly opposite her. He slowly raised his head, letting the hood fall back just enough to reveal the hard line of his jaw and his cold, dead eyes. I am your challenger. For a moment, recognition flickered in Misty's eyes, followed by disbelief, and then a flash of fear. She had seen those eyes before, in a boy she had broken. But the boy was gone. This was something else. She quickly masked her shock with a sneer. A challenger. Don't be ridiculous. You can't just walk in here and... I am challenging you, Misty, the water-type master, to a full 6-on-6 battle, Red's voice boomed, cutting her off. Unless, of course, the great mistress of the sea is afraid of a little storm. The crowd gasped. The audacity of the challenge was breathtaking. It was a direct insult to one of the world's most famous trainers. Misty's face flushed with anger. Her pride would not allow her to back down, especially not in front of a global audience. Afraid? You've got a lot of nerve. She snapped. Fine, I accept. I'll teach you a lesson in humility and wash you right out of this stadium. The referee, looking bewildered, ran to the center of the field. The tournament officials were in an uproar, but the crowd was electric. This was real drama. This was what they had come to see. Misty took her position, her face a thunderous mask. You're going to regret this for the rest of your short, pathetic career. Red simply reached for his first Pokeball. The regrets, he said, his voice a chilling whisper that somehow reached across the field, are all yours. The referee raised his flags. This will be a full 6-on-6 battle between Gym Leader Misty and the challenger, Red. Let the battle begin. Misty was first, her choice a classic display of power. Gyarados, let's go. The massive sea serpent erupted from the Pokeball with a deafening roar, its presence instantly intimidating. Red's response was calm, almost casual. He tossed his Pokeball, and a Feraligatr of immense size and savagery appeared, its powerful jaws snapping, thick cords of muscle visible beneath its blue scales. It met Gyarados' glare without an ounce of fear. A Feraligatr, how original, Misty mocked. Gyarados, Dragon Dance. Ice Punch, Red commanded, his voice flat. As Gyarados began its elegant, power-boosting dance, Feraligatr's fist began to glow with a pale, frosty light. But it didn't charge. It punched the ground. The entire field beneath Gyarados was instantly flash-frozen in a sheet of slick, treacherous ice. Gyarados' dance faltered, its massive body struggling for purchase on the unstable surface. Now, Red said, superpower. Before Misty could react, Feraligatr shot forward, using the ice to slide at an incredible speed. It slammed into the off-balance Gyarados with the force of a freight train. The super-effective move, combined with the raw physical power, was devastating. Gyarados was hurled through the air, crashing onto the ice with a sound like cracking thunder. It was out cold. The stadium was silent. Misty stared, dumbfounded. He hadn't just defeated her ace, he had humiliated it, using its own setup against it. "One," Red said, his voice echoing in the stillness. Feraligatr returned to his side, its cold eyes fixed on its next opponent. Misty, shaken but furious, sent out her Starmie. "You got lucky." "Starmie, Psychic." "Espeon," Red countered, sending out the sleek, Psychic Cat. Light screen. A shimmering wall of energy appeared just as Starmie's Psychic Blast hit, diffusing its power. "Now," Red commanded, "Shadow Ball." Espeon moved with liquid grace, firing a perfect sphere of dark energy that struck Starmie dead on. It was a relentless, calculated assault. Misty's Pokémon were powerful, but Red's were on another plane of existence. They fought with a synergy and ruthlessness she had never witnessed. Her Starmie fell, then her Vaporeon, outmaneuvered by a shockingly agile Snorlax. Then her Golduck, ensnared and overpowered by a Venusaur that seemed to command the very earth. With each defeat, the crowd grew quieter, their initial excitement turning to stunned awe, and then to a palpable fear. This wasn't a battle, it was a methodical execution. High in the stands, Brock and the other masters watched, their faces grim. Brock felt a cold dread creeping up his spine. He knew that stance, that silent, intense connection with his Pokémon. But it was twisted, colder, harder. Finally, Misty was down to her last Pokémon. She was trembling, her confidence shattered. "Blastoise, I'm counting on you." Hydro Cannon. The massive turtle appeared, cannons gleaming. It unleashed a cataclysmic blast of water, a torrent powerful enough to rip through steel. Red's answer was simple, Charizard. The fire dragon emerged with a roar that was pure primordial fury. Its flames burned with an intensity that was almost white-hot. It didn't dodge the hydro cannon. It met it head-on with a flamethrower so potent that the water vaporized into a massive cloud of steam that enveloped the entire field. When it cleared, Blastoise was staggering, scorched by the incredible heat. Charizard descended, grabbed the turtle Pokémon, flew high into the air, and ended the match with a seismic toss that cracked the stadium floor. It was over. 5 of Misty's Pokémon were down. She had nothing left but her Azumarill. Red still had Charizard, and his final, unseen Pokémon. But Charizard was recalled. Red stood with only his Pikachu. Misty, desperate and humiliated, made her last stand. "Azumarill, let's go. Use Play Rough." The small, blue Pokémon charged, its fairy typing giving it a massive advantage. The crowd held its breath. Could this be the turning point? Red watched its approach, his expression unchanged. "Pikachu." Pikachu's scarred eye snapped open. "End this." Azumarill leapt, its body glowing with fairy energy. Pikachu vanished. Not with agility, not with quick attack. It just vanished. A split second later, It reappeared directly above the airborne Azumarill, its body crackling not with yellow, but with incandescent white electricity. Volt crash. The impact was silent but absolute. A flash of blinding white light, and Azumarill was on the ground, unconscious. Not a mark on it, but its energy was completely depleted. Silence. Complete, deafening silence. The referee stared, forgetting to even raise his flag. Misty fell to her knees, her eyes wide with the horror of her utter and complete defeat. Red slowly walked across the ravaged field, his cloak whispering over the cracked earth. He stopped in front of her. Pikachu leapt from the ground back to his shoulder, its job done. He leaned down, his voice low enough that only she could hear it, a ghost from her past speaking words of damnation. "This is the power you told me to abandon," he whispered. "This is the strength you tried to steal. You are not a master. You are a memory, and I am here to erase you." He straightened up, turned his back on her, and walked away, leaving a broken champion in the center of a silent stadium. The world had just met Red, and his crusade had only just begun. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Strategist's Gambit. The world reacted to Misty's defeat not with a ripple, but with a tidal wave. News channels scrapped their scheduled programming, playing the footage of the battle on a continuous, hypnotic loop. Commentators, analysts, and even former champions were brought in to dissect every second of the 6-0 humiliation. They broke down Red's unconventional strategies, the terrifying, almost sentient power of his Pokémon, and the cold, surgical precision of his victory. The name, Red, was on everyone's lips, a whisper of fear and awe. He was a phantom who had materialized from nowhere to fell a titan. In a quiet, book-lined office at the Pewter Museum of Science, Dr. Brock Slate watched the footage for the 10th time. The screen reflected in his glasses, masking the turmoil in his eyes. He saw it all, the Feraligatr using the ice to turn Gyarados' size into a liability. The Charizard's overwhelming power, the final, impossible speed of the scarred Pikachu. But more than that, he saw the stance of the trainer. The subtle, almost imperceptible hand gestures. The complete absence of shouted commands for the most complex maneuvers. He knew that synergy. He had traveled the world with it. He had watched it grow, evolve, and triumph. And he had helped to kill it. His phone buzzed, a call from a secure number. He answered. "Misty, are you all right?" Her voice on the other end was brittle, stripped of all its usual fire. He was there, Brock. It was him. "Don't tell me you didn't see it." "I saw it," Brock said, his own voice low and heavy. "The way his Pokémon moved, it's like nothing I've ever recorded. The energy output from that Pikachu's final attack defies all known models of electrical generation in Pokémon." "Forget your models," she snapped, a flicker of her old self returning. "It's Ash. I don't know what happened to him, what he's become, but it was him." "Those eyes," she trailed off, a shudder in her voice. "He said he was there to erase me." A cold dread, colder than any scientific observation, settled in Brock's stomach. They hadn't been trying to help him. They had been trying to control him, to sand down his sharp edges until he fit into their comfortable, predictable world. They had pushed him away, and in his place, this force of nature had returned. "I'm looking into it," Brock said, pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose. "I'm accessing the global trainer database, running facial recognition against the footage. But his hood, it's almost like it actively obscures his features. Whoever this is, he's a ghost." "He's not a ghost, Brock," Misty whispered. "He's a reckoning." The line went dead. Brock leaned back in his leather chair, the silence of his office pressing in on him. He had built a new life here. He was respected, admired. He published papers, gave lectures, and molded the next generation of trainers into responsible, ethical caretakers. He preached balance, safety, and understanding. The man on the screen was the antithesis of everything he now stood for. He was raw, untamed power. He was the wilderness personified. He was the boy they had tried to cage, returned as the monster they had created. His investigation wouldn't just be about identifying a threat, it would be about confronting the sins of his past. Pewter City was a bastion of granite and permanence. It was a city that prided itself on being unchanging, its identity carved from the stone of the mountains that sheltered it. But as Red walked its clean, orderly streets, he could feel the fault lines beneath the surface. He was the earthquake it was not prepared for. He didn't go to the gym. He didn't seek out Brock directly. Vengeance was not a dish best served cold, it was a dish best prepared with patience and precision. He spent 2 days observing, a shadow moving against the stone walls. He learned Brock's routine, the morning research sessions at the museum, the afternoon guest lectures for the Trainers Academy, the quiet evenings in his small, meticulously organized house. He saw the way people looked at Brock. They saw a pillar of the community, a wise and gentle authority on the Pokemon world. They saw a man who had traded the dusty roads of a trainer for the esteemed halls of academia. Red saw a coward, a man who had become so afraid of the untamed fire he once traveled with that he had decided to write rulebooks on how to contain it. On the 3rd day, Red attended one of Brock's public lectures. The auditorium was packed. Students, trainers, and citizens hung on Brock's every word. The topic was ethical power scaling, the dangers of pushing Pokemon beyond their natural limits. It was a direct, albeit academic, condemnation of everything Ash Ketchum had ever been. Brock stood at a podium, a large holographic screen behind him displaying charts and graphs. "The bond we share with our Pokemon is a sacred trust," he said, his voice resonating with practiced sincerity. "It is our duty to nurture their growth, but also to recognize their boundaries. Pushing a Pokemon to win at all costs, to treat them as mere instruments in the pursuit of a trophy, is not a sign of a strong bond. It is, in fact, a form of abuse." From the shadowed back row of the amphitheater, a voice, cold and clear, cut through the reverent silence. "You're wrong." A murmur went through the crowd. All heads turned, trying to find the source. Brock squinted against the stage lights. "Excuse me, do you have a question?" Red stood up slowly, his cloaked form drawing every eye. "It was not a question. It was a correction. You speak of limits as if they are absolute. You mistake a cage for a sanctuary." Brock's posture stiffened. He couldn't see the man's face, but he felt the voice in his bones. "I'm speaking of responsible training. There are documented risks, physical and psychological, to forcing Pokemon into battles they are not prepared for." "Preparedness is not the same as potential," Red countered, his voice effortlessly filling the hall. "You analyze the known. You measure what is. But a true bond, a symbiotic bond, does not recognize limits. It shatters them. Tell me, Doctor," the title was laced with acid, "what is the maximum electrical output of a standard Pikachu?" Brock was taken aback by the specific question. "Well, under extreme duress, a well-trained Pikachu can generate a charge approaching 100,000 volts, but sustained output as significantly. Mine can generate 10 times that," Red stated flatly. "And sustain it. My Charizard's internal flame burns at a temperature that should, by your models, melt its own bones. My Snorlax has a metabolic rate that allows it to move with the speed of a Jolteon for short bursts. These are not anomalies. They are the result of a bond that transcends your charts and your theories. It is a bond built on absolute trust, pushing past pain and fear together, to reach a place your ethical limits would never allow." Pikachu, on his shoulder, let out a single, sharp spark from its cheek. The lights in the auditorium flickered and buzzed for a second, then stabilized. The message was clear. The hall was dead silent. The students were staring, their minds racing. This mysterious figure was challenging the very foundations of what they were being taught. Brock stood frozen at the podium, his face pale. He had no answer. His research, his life's work for the past several years, had just been publicly dismantled by a stranger in a cloak. Red held the silence for a moment longer, letting his words sink in. "Your science is a study of the past. You are teaching them how to maintain the status quo. You are not preparing them for the future." He turned and walked out of the auditorium, the crowd parting for him as if by instinct. He left behind a room full of questions and a professor whose carefully constructed world had just been fractured to its core. That evening, Brock was in his lab, trying and failing to focus on his work. The stranger's words echoed in his mind. He was running simulations, trying to model the energy readings from the Saffron City battle, but the numbers wouldn't compute. The data was impossible. It was like trying to measure a hurricane with a rain gauge. His work was interrupted by a call from the museum's head of paleontology. "Brock, you need to get down here. The team at the Mount Moon excavation just found something. Something big. The dig site was an hour's drive from the city, nestled in a secluded valley at the base of the mountain. For weeks, they had been excavating what they thought was an ancient human settlement. But they had broken through a false floor, revealing something far older and far stranger. When Brock arrived, the site was buzzing with energy under the glare of portable floodlights. "We've never seen anything like it," the lead paleontologist, a woman named Dr. Aris, told him, her voice trembling with excitement. "The architecture doesn't match any known Kanto civilization. And these carvings." She led him to the edge of a deep pit. At the bottom, a massive stone structure was half unearthed. Its surface was covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift and writhe in the artificial light. They gave off a faint, unsettling energy that made the hairs on Brock's arms stand up. "The energy readings are off the charts," Dr. Aris continued. "Almost like there's a low-level psychic field emanating from the stone itself." Brock's scientific mind was racing, but another part of him, the part that had seen dragons and ghosts and gods, felt a primal sense of dread. He spent the next few hours working with the team, trying to decipher the strange, unfamiliar pictograms. They seemed to tell a story, but the language was symbolic, alien. As the night wore on, the strange energy field intensified. The team's equipment started to malfunction. Then, with a low groan that seemed to come from the earth itself, the ground shuddered. A fissure cracked open along the wall of the pit, and a section of scaffolding collapsed, trapping two young researchers under a cascade of rock and debris. Panic erupted. The site foreman yelled into his radio, calling for the city's emergency rescue squad, but they were a half-hour away at best. The trapped researchers were screaming, their voices muffled by the rock. Dr. Aris turned to Brock, her face desperate. "Dr. Slate, what do we do? Your onyx, your golem, can they move this?" Brock looked at the unstable rockfall. "It's too risky. A single wrong move and the whole wall could come down on top of them. We need to be careful. We have to wait for the proper equipment." His voice was textbook calm, his mind running through safety protocols. It was the responsible, correct answer. "We don't have time," one of the trapped researchers shrieked. "The pressure is, I can't breathe." From the shadows at the edge of the pit, a voice spoke, laced with contempt. "You would let them die for the sake of your protocols." Brock spun around. Red was standing there, his Pikachu a silent sentinel on his shoulder. He hadn't seen him arrive. He hadn't heard a single footstep. "You," Brock gasped. Red ignored him, his obsidian eyes fixed on the rockslide. He reached for a pokeball on his belt. "Your analysis is flawed. You see only the risk. You fail to see the solution." He threw the ball. A Tyranitar of colossal size materialized with a ground-shaking roar. It was larger than any Brock had ever seen, its rocky hide covered in old scars, its eyes glowing with intelligent ferocity. "There," Red said, pointing to a single, massive boulder near the top of the pile. It was the keystone holding the entire precarious structure together. "Dislodge it." Upward. Brock's eyes widened in horror. "Are you insane? That's the linchpin. If you move that, the whole thing will collapse inward and crush them." "No," Red said with absolute certainty. "You see a pile of rocks. I see a puzzle of weight and pressure. The instability is uniform. A sufficient upward force applied to that specific point will cause the rest of the debris to fall outward, not inward. It is a calculated risk. The only one that saves them." Without waiting for another protest, Red gave a sharp nod to his Tyranitar. The beast lowered its head, and with a guttural roar, it thrust its armored skull upward, striking the keystone with unbelievable force. For a heart-stopping second, the entire rockfall shifted, groaning. The researchers screamed. Then, just as Red had predicted, the pile seemed to explode outward, rocks and debris cascading harmlessly down the sides of the pit, leaving the two researchers shaken but completely untouched in a small, clear pocket. The entire site crew stood in stunned silence. Red recalled his Tyranitar, the act as simple as breathing. He looked at Brock, his gaze withering. "They are alive because I ignored your safe methods. Your fear of risk is a greater danger than any I have ever faced." He turned and walked toward the ancient structure at the bottom of the pit, leaving Brock standing at the edge, his scientific certainty and his moral authority completely and utterly destroyed. Brock found him deep inside the newly unearthed ruin. The air was cold, ancient, and thick with an energy that felt wrong. Red stood before a massive, sealed stone door that blocked the entrance to the structure's inner sanctum. The door was covered in the same strange, alien text that had baffled Brock's team for weeks. "What do you want?" Brock asked, his voice hoarse. He wasn't speaking to a stranger anymore. He was speaking to a ghost. Ash. The name hung in the dead air. Red did not turn. "That name is a gravestone. You have no right to speak it." We were worried," Brock stammered, the words feeling pathetic and hollow even to him. "We thought you were destroying yourself. We were trying to help." "Help." Red finally turned, and in the dim light of the excavation lamps, Brock could see his face clearly for the first time. It was Ash's face, but it was as if all the youth, all the warmth, had been carved out of it, leaving only sharp angles and cold fury. "You ambushed me. You tried to steal my family. You called my life's purpose a childish dream. You did not want to help me. You wanted to chain me." He gestured to the sealed door. "My whole life, I've sought out challenges like this. Ancient mysteries, unseen power. It's a language I understand. It's the language you tried to make me forget. We can't translate it," Brock admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "The pictograms don't correspond to any known dialect." "That is because you are trying to read words," Red said, stepping closer to the door. "This is not a history. It is a warning, and it is a lock. The ancients who built this did not communicate with letters. They communicated with nature, with the elements." He ran a hand over the carvings. "Your team sees birds and stars. I see constellations that are only visible during a solar eclipse. Your team sees waves and mountains. I see a precise sequence of tidal and seismic frequencies. This isn't a door you open with a key. It's a door you open with harmony." Before Brock could process what he was saying, Red began to act. Charizard. The great dragon appeared, its flame a beacon in the darkness. "Heat the solar sigil, precisely to the temperature of magma." Charizard unleashed a controlled stream of fire, heating a specific carving of a sun until it glowed a cherry red. Feraligatr. The water starter appeared in a flash. A single, pressurized pulse on the lunar sigil. The temperature must match that of the abyssal plane. Feraligatr shot a perfect, contained jet of icy water at a moon carving, which hissed and steamed, the sudden temperature change causing a low hum to emanate from the door. Espeon. Align the harmonic frequencies. Match the vibration of the planet's core. The psychic Pokémon stepped forward, its gem glowing. It closed its eyes, and the hum coming from the door sharpened into a pure, resonant tone. The intricate patterns on the door began to glow with a faint, purple light. One by one, Red called upon his team, each performing a specific, seemingly unrelated task. His Venusaur caused a single vine to sprout from the stone floor and touch a floral pattern. His Pikachu released a static charge into a carving of a lightning bolt. It was a symphony of elemental power, conducted by a master. Brock watched, mesmerized and horrified. This was a bond that went beyond science, beyond understanding. This was something primal. With a final, deep groan of ancient stone, the massive door slid open. A wave of cold, stale air washed over them, carrying a scent of ozone and decay. The chamber within was dark, its walls covered in terrifying murals. They depicted a swirling mass of shadow and tendrils, a being of pure malevolence, consuming lands, Pokémon, and people. Below the largest mural, a single line of text was carved, stark and clear. Red read it aloud, his voice low and grim. "It feeds on broken trust. It wakes with the echo of betrayal." He turned to face Brock, his eyes burning with an intensity that dwarfed the flames of his Charizard. He had not sought Brock out for a battle. He had sought him out to deliver a verdict. The world is facing a threat you cannot measure, a darkness you cannot comprehend. And you, Doctor, in your infinite wisdom, were so busy trying to fix me that you have been blind to the real threat. Red recalled his Pokémon and walked into the darkness of the chamber without another word. He left Brock standing at the threshold, the chilling prophecy of the ancients echoing in the tomb. He was alone with the murals of the coming apocalypse, the cold truth of his failure, and the crushing realization that in trying to save his friend from his dream, he may have just doomed the entire world. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Performer's Encore. The Hoenn region was a riot of color and sound. After the cold, Hard truths of Kanto, Slateport City felt like a fever dream. Banners depicting smiling Pokémon in stylish poses fluttered from every lamppost. The air, thick with the scent of saltwater and fried food, buzzed with the relentless, cheerful energy of the grand festival. Here, power was secondary. Here, style was king. Red, a wound of shadow and silence in the vibrant landscape, found it all sickening. He stood by the shimmering water of the port, watching the ferries arrive, disgorging hundreds of aspiring coordinators and their meticulously groomed Pokémon. They were a flock of peacocks, preening and posturing, their talk filled with appeals, combinations, and the all-important final impression. They were preparing for a pageant, not a battle. To Red, it was a grotesque perversion of the bond he held sacred, a deliberate dulling of a Pokémon's wild spirit for the sake of entertainment. His target was the heart of this world, its beloved monarch. May Maple, the princess of Hoenn. He remembered her well, a girl who had started her journey afraid of Pokémon, only to become a top coordinator. He had respected her journey once. Now, he saw her as the chief architect of this gilded cage, a trainer who had taught a generation that a Pokémon's value lay in how well it could dance. He made his way to the contest hall, a magnificent glass dome that glittered like a jewel on the coastline. Inside, the atmosphere was even more cloying. Coordinators were practicing in the halls, their Pokémon executing flawless spins and releasing perfectly shaped hearts of fire and water. He saw a Skitty balancing on a ball and a Beautifly leaving a trail of sparkling powder in the air. He saw domestication. He saw weakness. At the registration desk, a man with an impossibly large, blue pompadour greeted him with a dazzling smile. "Welcome to the Grand Festival. Name, please." Red. The man's fingers danced over the keyboard. Red, ah, there you are. Registered from, well, it doesn't say. No matter. Your contest pass, sir. May your appeals be dazzling and your battles be beautiful. He winked, a gesture of such practiced flamboyance that Red felt a surge of cold contempt. He took the pass and found a seat in the waiting area, a solitary blot of black ink on a brightly colored canvas. He watched, he listened, and he planned. This would not be a physical dismantling like the one in Saffron City, nor an intellectual one like in Pewter. This would be an ideological assassination, and he would perform it on their grandest stage. The appeals round began. One by one, coordinators took the stage, their 5 minutes a frantic explosion of choreographed moves. A trainer with a melodic created a whirlpool that blossomed into a shimmering ice sculpture. Another had a Plusle and Minun perform an acrobatic electrical routine that spelled out the word, friendship, in sparks. The crowd loved it. The judges, the effusive Mr. Contesta, the stoic Mr. Sukizo, and the kind-faced Nurse Joy, gave high marks, praising the harmony and the visual poetry. Then, it was his turn. The announcer's voice was a smooth baritone. And next up, a mysterious newcomer who's been making waves in the news. Give a big Hoenn welcome to Red. A polite, curious applause rippled through the audience. Red walked onto the stage, his cloak making no sound. The lights seemed to dim around him, the usual festive music faltering for a moment. He took his position and threw a single Pokeball. There was no flash of light, no grand entrance. A Heracross simply appeared. It was not a specimen bred for beauty. This Heracross was a warrior. Its single, mighty horn was chipped and scarred. Its blue carapace was dull, not polished, and its powerful limbs were braced for combat, not a performance. The crowd murmured in confusion. A Heracross, in the grand festival. Begin, the announcer declared. Red stood perfectly still. He gave no command. Heracross mirrored his stillness, its multifaceted eyes scanning the arena. The clock ticked. 10 seconds. 20. The murmuring grew louder. Was this a joke? What is he doing? Mr. Contesta whispered to the other judges. Remarkable, Mr. Sukizo said, his eyes narrowed. Then, Red made a single, subtle gesture, a slight inclination of his head towards a series of large, decorative pillars at the back of the stage, props that were part of the festival's theme. Heracross understood instantly. It flexed, the muscles in its body bunching like thick steel cables. With a low grunt, it walked over to the largest pillar, a solid, 10-foot-tall structure of faux marble, dug its claws in, and lifted. The crowd gasped. The pillar must have weighed over a ton. Heracross lifted it cleanly over its head, its legs not even trembling. There was no flair, no dramatic pose. It was a simple, brutal, awe-inspiring display of raw, unadulterated strength. He held it there for 10 seconds, a testament to his power, then gently placed it back down without a sound. Then, it turned, walked back to the center of the stage, and stood at attention. That was it. That was the entire performance. The audience was silent, unsure how to react. They had just witnessed something incredible, but it wasn't pretty. It wasn't a show. It was a statement. On the judges' panel, Nurse Joy looked unsettled. Mr. Contesta was frowning. Well, it certainly was a display of a Pokemon's natural abilities. But Mr. Sukizo was leaning forward, a rare glint of excitement in his eyes. The control, he said, his voice a low rumble. To lift such a weight, and then to place it with such precision, no wasted movement. The trust between trainer and Pokemon is absolute. Remarkable. Red's score appeared. It was low, barely enough to qualify for the next round. But he had passed. He had made his point. He recalled Heracross and walked off the stage, ignoring the confused whispers that followed him like a trail of smoke. He had shown them power. Soon, he would show them how fragile their beauty was against it. He was in the stark, concrete corridor backstage when he felt a presence behind him. A soft, hesitant voice spoke a name he had not heard spoken to his face in years. Ash. He stopped, but did not turn. The voice was a ghost from a city of heartbreak, a memory of vanilla-scented Pokepuffs and a blue ribbon he had once worn. Serena. Is it really you? She asked, stepping closer. He could hear the tremor in her voice, the desperate hope warring with the terrible evidence she had no doubt seen on the news. What happened to you? Why are you doing this? You should not have come here, he said, his voice flat, a wall of stone. I had to, she insisted, moving to stand in front of him, forcing him to look at her. Her eyes were just as he remembered, a deep and earnest blue, now swimming with confusion and pain. The way you battled Misty, that wasn't you. The Ash I knew loved Pokemon battles, but he was never cruel. The Ash you knew is dead, he said, the words like chips of ice. He died in Lumio City, on the day his friends decided his dreams were an inconvenience. Serena flinched as if struck. We were wrong, she whispered, tears welling. I was wrong. We were scared for you. We didn't know what else to do. But this anger, this revenge, it won't fix anything. She reached out, her hand hesitating before touching his arm. Please, come back. It's not too late. Remember our promise. Never give up until the very end. Her touch was like a brand, a jolt of a past he had tried to cauterize. For a single, unguarded moment, a crack appeared in his obsidian facade. He saw a flash of a rooftop in Lumio City, a heartfelt confession, a final, hopeful goodbye at the airport. A flicker of pain, raw and profound, crossed his face. Then, the mask slammed back down, colder and harder than before. He pulled his arm away from her touch. That was a childhood fantasy. You cling to the past because you are afraid of the future. He looked down at her, his eyes holding no warmth, no recognition. Your idealism is a weakness. It is the same weakness that allowed you to stand by and watch them try to break me. You made your choice that day in Professor Oak's lab. Now, live with it. He brushed past her, his cloak a whisper of finality. The boy who made that promise is gone. You are talking to his ghost. Serena stood frozen in the hallway, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. She watched him disappear into the shadows, the cold finality of his words echoing in the empty space where her hope had been. The Ash she had known, the boy who had inspired her to be her best, was truly and utterly gone. As Red continued down the corridor, he felt it. A subtle, discordant hum in the air. A cold spot in the festive warmth. He saw a pair of coordinators in the distance, arguing viciously over a dropped hairbrush, their faces contorted with an ugly, unnatural rage. He saw a Pokemon, a normally docile Delcatty, hiss and scratch at its trainer for no reason. It was the same unsettling energy he had felt in the tomb beneath Mt. Moon. The whispering shadow was here, too, feeding on the shallow, volatile emotions of the festival like a parasite. This world of forced smiles and brittle egos was a perfect breeding ground for it. The battle rounds were a massacre. Red moved through the bracket with the efficiency of a storm. His opponents came at him with their polished combinations, their meticulously practiced routines designed to chip away at an opponent's points while looking beautiful. Red ignored the points. His Snorlax, thought to be a slow, defensive Pokémon, used a shocking burst of belly drum-fueled speed to knock out a graceful Roserade before it could even begin its appeal. His Venusaur used its vines not to create floral displays, but to ensnare and crush a charging Flygon. He wasn't battling for points. He was battling for victory. The audience booed his brutal, efficient tactics. They called him unsporting, a brute who had no appreciation for the art of contests. Red didn't care. Their boos were the gasps of a dying philosophy. Soon, he stood in the final. As he had planned, his opponent was May Maple. The Princess of Hoenn took the stage, her expression a mixture of fear and defiance. She had seen what he had done to Misty. She had heard the whispers about him. But this was her stage, her kingdom, and she would defend it. She sent out her partner, the one she had raised from a Torchic, her magnificent Blaziken. "I don't know who you are, or why you're doing this," she yelled across the stage, her voice tight with emotion. "But I'm going to show you that there's more to being a trainer than just brute force. Beauty and grace are a form of strength, too." Red's response was to send out his Sceptile. The Pokémon materialized, a lean, green predator. Its eyes, slitted and yellow, held the cold intelligence of a creature that knew 100 ways to kill. The timer on the big screen started its 5-minute countdown. May began immediately, not giving him an inch. "Blaziken, let's go." Sky Uppercut, then follow up with Blaze Kick. Blaziken became a whirlwind of motion and fire. It shot into the air with breathtaking grace, its fist glowing with power, then twisted its body into a devastating, fiery arc kick. The combination was seamless, a perfect fusion of power and artistry that sent the crowd into a frenzy of appreciation. Red watched the attack come. Sceptile didn't move, it simply stood, its gaze locked on its opponent, tracking its every motion. At the last possible microsecond, as the flaming foot was about to connect, Red spoke a single word. "Disarm." Sceptile exploded into motion. It wasn't a move from a contest list. It was a strategy. It became a green blur, its own leaf blades snapping out not to clash, but to intercept. One blade parried the Sky Uppercut, redirecting the force. A second blade struck the joint of Blaziken's kicking leg, a precise, jarring blow that wasn't designed to injure, but to disrupt its balance and break its rhythm. Blaziken stumbled, its flawless combination shattered. It landed awkwardly, its points dropping from the failed attack. Before it could recover, Sceptile was on it. It didn't launch a grand counterattack. It moved in close, a flurry of precise, debilitating strikes. A jab to a pressure point, a sweep that forced Blaziken to defend, a feint that left it open. It wasn't a performance, it was a systematic deconstruction. Sceptile was taking May's beautiful, fiery dance and breaking it down into its clumsy, ineffective component parts. It showed the entire world that her art was fragile, a glass sculpture in the face of a granite fist. May watched in horror, her confidence crumbling. She shouted commands: fire spin, overheat, high jump kick, but Sceptile was always a step ahead, its movements economical and deadly. It used the flames of her attacks as a smokescreen, the force of her kicks to propel itself into a better position. It turned every beautiful move she made into a liability. Her points were plummeting. With 30 seconds left on the clock, Blaziken was on one knee, panting, its fiery spirit all but extinguished. Sceptile stood over it, its leaf blades gleaming, ready to deliver the final blow. Red had won. He had proven his point in the most humiliating way possible. Then, he did the unthinkable. "Sceptile, return." The green predator vanished in a flash of red light. Red had recalled his Pokémon. He had forfeited the match. A stunned silence fell over the massive dome. The timer hit 0. May was declared the winner by default. The crowd didn't cheer. They just stared, utterly bewildered. May looked at the grand festival trophy that was now hers, her face a mask of confusion and shame. She hadn't won. She had been dissected. Red walked to the center of the stage and took the announcer's microphone. His cold, amplified voice filled the silence, a funeral dirge in the temple of style. "You seek applause," he said, his obsidian eyes locking onto May's. "You dress them in ribbons and teach them to dance, forcing them to hide their true nature behind a mask of elegance. He gestured to the stunned audience. This is not a celebration of the bond between trainer and Pokémon. It is a monument to vanity. His gaze returned to May, his words a final, devastating verdict. True beauty is not in the performance. It is in the untamed spirit. The power that can shatter mountains. The wild heart you are so desperate to tame. You have not mastered your Pokémon. You have domesticated them. He let the microphone fall from his hand. It clattered onto the stage with a sound that echoed like a gunshot in the silent hall. He turned his back on the Princess of Hoenn in her hollow victory and walked away. Behind him, the crowd, their emotions stoked and twisted by the unseen influence of the shadow, finally broke. A chaotic wave of boos, cheers, and arguments washed over the arena. Red disappeared into that chaos, leaving another pillar of his past in ruins. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Unraveling of Order. The Pokémon world was a body convulsing. Red was the infection, and the fever was spreading. The leagues, the self-proclaimed immune system of the trainer world, scrambled for a response. Emergency meetings were held via grainy video calls, the faces of champions and Elite Four members grim and weary. They were figures of immense power, masters of strategy and battle, yet they were utterly baffled. This wasn't an evil team with a clear, conquerable goal. This was an ideological contagion. In a sunlit library in Sinnoh, a place of quiet contemplation and ancient texts, Cynthia listened to their arguments. Lance of Kanto, his cape a slash of red against a Spartan office, advocated for a united front, a task force to hunt Red down. He's a menace, he declared, his voice a baritone growl. He has publicly humiliated two of our most respected gym leaders and disrupted a grand festival. He must be stopped, by force if necessary. Alder, the former champion of Unova, his hair even wilder than usual, shook his head. Force is not the answer. He is winning hearts and minds, especially among the young and disillusioned. They see his power and mistake it for truth. We must counter with a message of unity, of the values he seeks to destroy. Cynthia remained silent, her fingers steepled before her lips, her gray eyes scanning the faces on her screen. They were generals planning a war, politicians crafting a speech. They were missing the point entirely. Red wasn't a soldier or a demagogue. He was a symptom, a brutal, devastatingly effective symptom of a sickness they had all allowed to fester. The complacency, the ego, the rigid doctrines, Red was simply the consequence. You're all wrong, she said finally, her voice calm but carrying an authority that silenced the others. You see a rogue element to be contained. I see a mirror. Everything he has done, every battle he has fought, has been a lesson. He targeted Misty's pride, Brock's rigid science, and May's manufactured beauty. He is not just defeating his opponents, he is dissecting their philosophies. To respond with brute force or empty platitudes is to prove his point for him. Lance bristled. Then what do you suggest, Cynthia? We let him continue to tear down everything we've built. What I suggest, she replied, a cool edge to her voice, is that one of us tries to understand why. I am not interested in issuing a warrant or a press release. I am interested in the truth. I will track him down myself. Not to arrest him, but to understand him. She disconnected the call, leaving the other champions to their arguments. She stood and walked to the window, overlooking the tranquil gardens of her estate. This was not a job for a task force. This was a puzzle, and it required a mind that could see beyond the obvious moves on the board. Red was a grandmaster playing a new game, and she, for the first time in a long time, felt the thrilling, dangerous pull of an equal. Unova was a region built on ideals, a place where the clash of truth and ideals had once shaped the very landscape. Its league was a rigid structure of 8 gyms, a gauntlet designed to test a trainer's adherence to a specific set of principles. It was a system ripe for demolition. Red's arrival in Castelia City was not announced, but it was felt. He walked the crowded streets, a void in the bustling metropolis. The city's energy was different from Hoenn's festive cheer. It was a thrum of ambition, of commerce, of trainers desperately trying to prove their worth. Here, the whispering shadow's influence was subtle but pervasive. It manifested as paranoia in the stock market, as bitter rivalries between business partners, as a sharp, angry edge to the city's ceaseless hustle. He did not go to the league headquarters. He went to the gym. But not Berg's. He traveled north, to the glittering, deafening heart of Unova's entertainment district, Nimbasa City. Elisa, the Nimbasa gym leader, was more than a trainer. She was a supermodel, an icon. Her gym was a runway, her battles a performance of dazzling speed and flawless execution. Her core strategy was Volt Switch, a relentless, untouchable assault that kept her opponents off balance, unable to land a solid blow. She represented the Unovan ideal of untouchable, fashionable perfection. Red walked into her gym, bypassing the roller coasters and the adoring fans, and issued his challenge. The battle was broadcast on every screen in the city. Elisa, confident and radiant under the spotlights, started with her emolga. "Let's give them a show they'll never forget," she declared. Volt Switch. The electric squirrel shot forward, crackling with energy. Red's response was a single Pokeball, from which emerged his Tyranitar. The colossal Pokémon was the antithesis of everything Elisa's gym represented. It was not fast, it was not elegant, it was a chunk of the mountain, given life and fury. The Emolga's Volt Switch struck its rocky hide and fizzled out, barely leaving a scorch mark. Tyranitar didn't even flinch from the super-effective hit. Then, it opened its mouth. A sandstorm erupted, a swirling vortex of grit and rock that filled the entire gym. The spotlights flickered and dimmed, the dazzling runway buried under a tide of primordial earth. Elisa's strategy was crippled. Her Pokémon couldn't switch, they could barely see. Her entire team, built on speed and precision, was blind and choking in the abrasive gale. One by one, Red's Tyranitar hunted them down and crushed them. Her Zebstrika, her Fluffy, her Stunfisk. They were dispatched with brutal, efficient earthquakes and stone edges that erupted from the sand-choked ground. The battle was over in less than 3 minutes. Red recalled his Tyranitar. The sandstorm slowly settled, revealing the wreckage. Elisa stood amidst her defeated Pokémon, her perfect makeup smudged, her confident smile gone, replaced by a look of sheer disbelief. Red's voice cut through the silence. "Speed is useless when you have nowhere to run. Your style is a fragile facade. The world is not a runway." He left without another word, leaving Nimbasa City in an uproar. He had taken their ideal of untouchable perfection and buried it in the dirt. The news of Elisa's defeat sent shockwaves through the Unova League. Alder, now acting as an advisor, called an emergency meeting with the region's most prominent trainers. Iris, the reigning champion of Unova, was there, her usual wild energy coiled into a tight knot of anger. Salon, now an S-class connoisseur whose restaurant was the most exclusive in the region, looked pale and deeply troubled. "His methods are barbaric," Iris seethed, slamming a fist on the table. "He fights without honor, without spirit. He must be confronted, overwhelmed. I will face him myself with my dragons." Salon adjusted his bow tie, his expression thoughtful. To rush in with pure power would be to fall into his trap, Iris. He invites such challenges. He wants you to meet him on his own terms. First, we must evaluate his recipe. What are his ingredients? Anger, certainly. Power, without question. But there is a strategy there, a bitter flavor I cannot yet identify. We must understand his motivations. His motivation is destruction. Iris shot back. No, a new voice said. Drayden, the old dragon master of Opalucid City, steeped in the wisdom of years, spoke for the first time. His motivation is education. He is holding a mirror up to each of us. He showed Elisa that style is not a substitute for substance. He will find a way to challenge your ideal of power, Iris. And your ideal of compatibility, Salon. He is coming for you both. The logic was undeniable. Iris and Salon, as Ash's former traveling companions, were the public faces of Unova's training philosophy. A challenge was inevitable. It was Iris who made the decision. Then we won't wait for him. We'll draw him out. A public exhibition. A 2-on-1 battle in Nimbasa. We will show him, and the world, the true strength of Unova's ideals, united. It was a bold, risky gambit. A public declaration. And in a quiet cafe in Castelia City, Red saw the news report on a nearby screen and allowed himself the smallest, coldest of smiles. They had taken the bait. The Nimbasa City Stadium was packed, the energy a volatile cocktail of fear and excitement. The stage was set for the ultimate clash of ideals. On one side stood Iris and her mighty Haxorus, its axe-like tusks gleaming, and Salon with his nimble Simisage. They were a portrait of Univen's strength. Raw, untamed power tempered by refined, strategic evaluation. On the other side, Red stood alone, his scarred Pikachu on his shoulder, his presence a vortex of silence in the roaring stadium. The referee announced the rules, his voice trembling slightly. This will be a double battle, Champion Iris and Connoisseur Salon versus the challenger, Red. Begin. This is the end of the line for you, Iris roared, her voice pure passion. Haxorus, Dragon Dance. Show him your power. Simisage, let us begin our evaluation, Salon declared. Acrobatics, test his defenses. Haxorus began its terrifying dance, its attack and speed stats rising with a visible red aura. Simisage leapt into the air, a green blur of motion, diving toward Red. It was a classic pincer movement, one designed to overwhelm and confuse. Red's response was deceptively simple. Espeon, Snorlax. The two Pokémon materialized. Espeon, sleek and psychic, its gem glowing with quiet intelligence, and Snorlax, a mountain of flesh, who surprisingly landed on its feet with a nimble grace that belied its size. A foolish choice. Salon analyzed aloud. The Snorlax is too slow to handle Simisage, and the Espeon is hopelessly outmatched by the sheer power of a boosted Haxorus. His recipe is a disaster. Haxorus, use outrage on the Espeon, Iris commanded. The mighty dragon, glowing with power, charged. Its eyes were red with fury, a living engine of destruction. Espeon, Red said calmly. Trick Room. Espeon's eyes flashed a brilliant pink. The air shimmered, and a translucent box of psychic energy enveloped the entire battlefield. The fundamental law of speed was reversed. The slowest would now be the fastest. Haxorus, in mid-charge, suddenly seemed to be moving through molasses. Simisage's acrobatic dive slowed to a crawl. But Snorlax, the slowest Pokémon on the field, was now a blur. Now, Red commanded, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. Snorlax. Belly Drum. Then, Ice Punch on Haxorus. In the warped time of the Trick Room, Snorlax moved with impossible speed. It slapped its stomach, its attack power skyrocketing to its absolute maximum. Before the horrified Iris could even shout a warning, a fist the size of a boulder, encased in glittering frost, slammed into Haxorus's side. The 4 times super effective hit, boosted by Belly Drum, was catastrophic. The mighty dragon was lifted from its feet and thrown across the stadium, crashing into the far wall, unconscious. The crowd was utterly silent. Iris's ideal, the pinnacle of uneven power, had been neutralized and defeated in a single, perfectly executed move. Sillin stared, his analytical mind struggling to process the scene. He used his own Pokémon's greatest weakness as its greatest strength. The flavor combination is impossible. Evaluation is useless when you cannot comprehend what you are seeing, Red said, his voice echoing Sillin's earlier thoughts. Simisage is still in the air. Espeon, Psyshock. Before the grass monkey could land, a bolt of pure psychic force struck it from below, sending it flying into the stadium lights. It was over. A flawless, devastating victory that had not just defeated 2 of Unova's best, but had shattered their core philosophies on their own stage. Red recalled his Pokémon. As he turned to leave, the silent stadium parting before him, he found his path blocked. A woman stood there, an aura of calm, unshakable confidence radiating from her. She was tall, with long blonde hair that obscured one eye, and wore a simple but elegant black coat. At her side, a Garchomp stood, its posture relaxed but its eyes missing nothing. Cynthia, the champion of Sinnoh, had found him. They call you a monster, she said, her voice not accusatory, but curious. It was a clear, musical tone that cut through the tension. A force of destruction, but I see a strategist. And a teacher, though your lessons are harsh. Red stopped, his obsidian eyes meeting her analytical gray ones. He recognized her instantly. He had studied every champion. She was the only one he considered a potential threat. I am a consequence, he replied, his voice a low rasp. I am what happens when the world's heroes become complacent. And what is the consequence of your actions? She asked, taking a step closer. Chaos, fear, you've shaken the foundations of every league you've touched. Good, he said, their foundations were rotten. A silent challenge passed between them, a meeting of 2 incredible wills. She was not afraid of him. And he, for the first time, felt a flicker of something other than contempt for another person. Respect. He could also feel the shadow's presence, feeding on the thousands of shocked and fearful emotions in the stadium, a cold undercurrent that only he and his Pokémon seemed to sense. He decided to give her a piece of the puzzle. "There is a sickness in this world, champion," he said, his voice low. "A shadow that feeds on the very order you protect. You are all so busy watching me, you cannot see it creeping up behind you." He moved to walk past her. Her Garchomp let out a low growl, a warning. Cynthia placed a hand on its head, silencing it. She let him go. She had not come here for a battle. She had come for an answer, and she had received something far more valuable, a question. Red disappeared into the stadium's tunnels, leaving Cynthia alone on the field with the defeated and the confused. She looked up at the darkening sky, then at the chaos of the crowd, a world of order beginning to unravel. The rogue trainer was not the whole story. He was just the first chapter. And she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that she was the only one equipped to read the rest. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Night's Fall. Kalos was a wound. Of all the places he had been, all the lands he had walked, this one alone held the power to make him feel the phantom ache of a severed limb. The train pulled into Lumio's city's grand station, and as Red stepped onto the platform, the very air seemed to vibrate with memory. The scent of fresh baked bread from the city's countless cafes, the cheerful chime of the Go-Goat shuttle service, the imposing silhouette of the Prism Tower piercing the sky, each sensation was a ghost, a reminder of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. He had felt his greatest triumph and his most profound heartbreak in this city. He had forged a bond with a Pokémon here that transcended anything he had ever known, a power that had felt limitless. And it was here that his world had ended, not with the league loss, but with the quiet, pained looks of disappointment from the friends who had cheered him on. The city, for all its dazzling lights and forward-thinking architecture, was a graveyard. And he had returned to haunt it. His target was the city's favorite son, its brilliant mind and steadfast protector, Clemont. After the Kalos League, Clement's renown as an inventor had exploded. He was now the head of Lumio's labs, a technological marvel that worked in tandem with the city's infrastructure. Red knew Clement's mind. It was a place of logic, of schematics, of problems and solutions. Faced with the unpredictable, chaotic variable that was Red, Clemont would have done the only thing he knew how: he would build a better cage. Red could feel it as he walked the city's wide boulevards. A network of new sensors, cleverly disguised as lampposts and public art. High-altitude drones, silent and sleek, patrolling the skies like metallic birds of prey. The city's energy grid hummed with a new, vigilant frequency. Clemont had turned Lumio's into a fortress. It was a testament to his genius. And Red was going to treat it like a playground. He ducked into a crowded side street cafe, taking a seat in a shadowed corner. He didn't order. He just watched, listened, and felt. Pikachu, tucked inside the folds of his cloak, was a low-level EMP device waiting for a command. On a large public view screen across the plaza, a news report was playing. It showed Clemont, looking tired but determined, standing beside the city's mayor. "The Red threat is a challenge, it is true," Clemont said, adjusting his glasses. His voice was calm, reassuring, the voice of a man who believed in the infallible power of his own intellect. "But Lumio's city is a beacon of progress. We have implemented a new, citywide security network, the Lumio's Eye. It utilizes predictive tracking algorithms, aura signature analysis, and a fleet of autonomous drones. Any unauthorized use of high-level Pokémon power will be instantly pinpointed and neutralized. This city is safe. The future is now." Red almost smiled. The future is now. The inventor's creed, so full of arrogant optimism. So blind. He gave Pikachu a silent command. The Pokémon's cheeks sparked, not with a destructive blast, but with a single, precise, modulated pulse of electromagnetic energy. Across the plaza, the giant view screen showing Clement's confident face flickered, dissolved into static, and then went dark. A few seconds later, it lit up again. But it wasn't the news report. It was a single, stark image. A perfect, hand-drawn sketch of a Pikachu, its eyes scarred, winking. Chaos erupted in the plaza. In the Lumio's I Command Center, alarms blared. Clement, who was overseeing the system personally, stared at the intrusion report, his blood running cold. The hack wasn't just a hack, it was a message. Red was here, and he was laughing at him. Pinpoint the source of the EMP. Clement ordered, his voice tight. Get me a visual. On the main screen, a map of the city lit up, a dozen different sensor readings trying to triangulate the energy burst. But the data was a mess. Secondary, smaller pulses were now firing off all over the city, creating ghost signals, confusing the system. Red's Pikachu wasn't just a hammer, it was a scalpel, surgically injecting chaos into the heart of Clement's perfect machine. He's playing with us, Clement murmured, a bead of sweat tracing a path down his temple. For the next 2 days, it was a city-wide chess match. Clement deployed his drones, and Red, with the help of his Espeon, projected psychic illusions of powerful Pokémon, sending the drones on wild goose chases into empty alleyways. Clement heightened the aura sensors, and Red had his Snorlax use a minimal energy rest to create a massive, dormant aura signature that drew all the attention while he moved freely through the city's underbelly. He disabled Clement's drones not by destroying them, but by having his Venusaur's vines snake up from the sewer grates to precisely snip their power couplings. He left them hanging from lampposts, inert and useless, a trail of breadcrumbs leading nowhere. He was showing Clement, and the world, that technology was a rigid, predictable system. And he was the chaos that no algorithm could ever predict. He knew she would find him. He had been waiting for it. He was standing on a bridge over the Lumio's river, the lights of the Prism Tower reflecting in the dark water, when she appeared. "I knew it was you," Serena said. Her voice wasn't soft and hesitant this time. It was strong, forged in the fire of his rejection in Hoenn. She was no longer just sad. She was angry. "I held on to a little piece of hope that I was wrong. That it was all some horrible mistake. But it's not. This cruelty, this game you're playing with Clement, this is you now." Red didn't turn. "Go home, Serena. This is not your fight. It became my fight the moment you decided to hurt our friends." She shot back, stepping up beside him. "Clement has barely slept in a week. He's terrified, not for himself, but for the city. For Bonnie. You remember Bonnie, don't you? Or is she just another casualty in your little war?" The name was a needle, straight to the heart. Bonnie, with her boundless energy, her search for a keeper for her big brother, her innocent belief in him. He allowed a flicker of the memory, then crushed it. "They brought this on themselves," he said, his voice a low growl. "Did they?" she challenged, her voice rising. "They were wrong, Ash. Terribly, stupidly wrong, but they were trying to help, in their own twisted way. They were your friends, and the Ash I knew, the one who taught me to never give up, he would never, ever give up on his friends. He would have been angry, he would have yelled, but he would have fought to make them understand. He wouldn't have become this monster, trying to burn the whole world down just to prove it wronged him." Her words were sharper than any Pokémon attack. They bypassed his armor and struck the bruised, broken thing beneath. For a moment, the iron control he held over himself wavered. A memory, unbidden and vivid, broke through. A summer night, just outside the city. The two of them, sitting on a hill, watching a meteor shower. A lull in the conversation. She had looked at him, her blue eyes reflecting the starlight, and said, "You know, you helped me find my dream. I hope I can help you achieve yours." He had just grinned his goofy, confident grin. "We'll all achieve them, together." The memory was so real he could almost feel the warm night air. The pain of it was a physical shock. His hands, hidden in his cloak, clenched into fists so tight his knuckles went white. He squeezed his eyes shut for a fraction of a second. Serena saw it, the flicker of pain, the momentary crack in the mask. Her own anger softened, replaced by a wave of profound sorrow. "He's still in there," she whispered, taking a step closer. "The boy I traveled with is still in there somewhere." The moment of vulnerability passed. The walls slammed back into place, higher and thicker than before. He turned to her, and his eyes were voids. The coldness in them made her recoil. "You're right," he said, his voice chillingly soft. "He wouldn't have become this monster. But that monster is all that's left because you and the others killed the boy." He started to walk away. She had one last card to play, one last ghost to summon. Is that what he would think? She called after him. What would Greninja say if he could see you now? Red froze. His back was to her, but she saw his shoulders tense. He didn't answer. He just stood there for a long moment, a statue silhouetted against the city lights. Then, without looking back, he walked on, disappearing into the labyrinthine streets, leaving her alone on the bridge with the weight of all their shared memories. The final move of the game was his. He hacked the city's emergency broadcast system. It wasn't a complex message. Just his voice, cold and amplified, echoing from every public speaker and screen in Lumiose. Clemont, your toys are broken. Your logic has failed. Prism Tower, Midnight, come alone. It was a classic, dramatic challenge. And it was bait. He knew Clemont, the hero, the protector, would not be able to resist. He was waiting for him at the top of the tower, in the gym's main battlefield. The place was a marvel of technology, all moving platforms, glowing energy conduits, and polished steel. Clemont was there, as predicted, his face pale but resolute. His little sister, Bonnie, was not with him, a fact for which Red was grimly grateful. It is you, Clemont said, his voice shaking slightly but firm. I should have known. No one else could have done this. You built a city of glass, Red replied, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. I am merely throwing stones. You're hurting people, Clemont insisted. You're spreading fear. This isn't strength, Ash. It's a tantrum. This, Red said, reaching for a Pokeball, is a lesson. And your final exam is about to begin. The battle was a clash of two worlds. Clemont, ever the strategist, had analyzed every one of Red's previous battles. He had countermeasures. He used the gym's moving platforms to keep his Pokémon out of reach, forcing Red to adapt. His ace, a powerful Luxray with crackling fur, used electric terrain to boost its power and prevent Red from using status moves. But Red did not play by the rules of conventional battle. He saw the gym not as an obstacle, but as a weapon. His Feraligatr used Ice Beam not on Clement's Pokémon, but on the gears of the moving platforms, freezing them in place. His Charizard used the energy conduits that lined the walls as a power source, absorbing the ambient electricity to supercharge a Thunder Punch that sent Clement's Magnezone flying. He turned every invention, every clever piece of technology, into a liability. Clemont was down to his last Pokémon. The Luxray, proud and powerful, stood its ground, its electric aura making the air hum. Red recalled his Charizard. He had only one Pokémon left to use. I have analyzed all the Pokémon you've used so far, Clemont said, pushing his glasses up, a desperate attempt to cling to his logic. My Luxray's Intimidate ability has lowered your physical attack's stats. It has a speed advantage and a type advantage against any water or flying type you might have. Statistically, I have the upper hand. Red looked at him, a flicker of something that might have been pity in his eyes. You still don't understand. My strength was never in statistics. He tossed his final Pokeball. There was no grand flash. Just a whisper of shadow and water, and then it was there. Tall, sleek, its long tongue wrapped around its neck like a scarf. Its eyes were sharp and red, burning with a fierce, ancient loyalty. Clemont gasped. Greninja, the Pokémon he had left in Kalos to protect it. The hero who had fought alongside Zygarde. It was here, but it was different, harder, colder. Its gaze held the same chilling focus as its trainer. It's impossible, Clemont whispered. He was in the wilds, protecting the ecosystem. He never stopped protecting me, Red said. Their bond had never been broken by distance. When Red had made his choice on MT Silver, Greninja had felt it across the world. And it had come. Luxray, Wild Charge, Clemont yelled, his voice cracking. The electric lion became a bolt of lightning, rocketing across the field. Red didn't say a word. He didn't have to. He simply closed his eyes, and the world seemed to hold its breath. He and Greninja moved as one. A vortex of water erupted around the frog Pokémon, swirling, coalescing, shrouding it in a veil of torrential power. When it subsided, Greninja was changed. Its form was sleeker, more powerful, and on its back, a giant shuriken of pure, concentrated water had formed. The Ash Greninja transformation was complete. But this was not the hero of Kalos. This was a silent, shadowy warrior, its power fueled by years of shared pain and resolve. Greninja vanished. It moved with a speed that defied physics, a phantom of water and shadow. It appeared behind the charging Luxray, a blur of motion. The water shuriken on its back pulsed with dark energy. Water shuriken, Red whispered, the command an afterthought. The shuriken launched. It didn't just strike Luxray. It enveloped it. The battle was over. The Luxray lay unconscious, its electric aura extinguished. Clement stared, his mind unable to compute what it had just seen. A power that came from nowhere, that followed no rules, that shattered every one of his carefully calculated probabilities. Red recalled Greninja. He walked across the field and stood before the defeated inventor. Logic cannot save you from the coming storm, Clement, he said. Your inventions, your science, they are children's toys in the face of what is waking up. You tried to protect your city. But you can't even protect yourself. He turned to leave. At the gym's exit, Serena was standing there, her face streaked with tears. She had seen the whole thing. He stopped, his back to her, the silence between them heavier than any words. The boy you knew died in this city, he said, the sentence a final, brutal epitaph. He walked out of the tower and into the night. And as he did, a low hum started deep within the tower's core. The lights in the gym flickered. Then, across the whole of Lumio's city, the power began to fail. Streetlights went dark. Buildings plunged into shadow. The Prism Tower, the city's beacon, went black. The Whispering Shadow, gorging on the fear and despair of the city's protector, had just taken its first bite out of the City of Light. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. A Champion's Test. After the fall of Lumiose, Red vanished. He did not appear in another city to issue another challenge. The news cycle, starved of its phantom menace, turned to frantic speculation. Had he been secretly captured? Had he accomplished his goal and simply disappeared? To the world, he was a ghost that had faded with the morning mist. But Cynthia knew better. A storm like that does not simply dissipate. It goes out to sea to gather strength. She did not use satellites or tracking drones. Technology was Clement's game, a game Red had proven adept at breaking. Instead, she used history, logic, and intuition. She studied the locations of his attacks. Saffron, Pewter, Slateport, Nimbasa, Lumiose. They were not random. Each was a place of personal significance, a node in the network of his past. He was not just on a path of revenge, he was on a pilgrimage of pain. Where would such a pilgrimage lead after its most painful stop? Not to a new target, but to a sanctuary. A place to recalibrate. A place of power. There were few places in the world more potent than the crown of MT. Coronet in her own home region of Sinnoh. Spear Pillar. The genesis of their world, where legends of time and space were born. A place of thin air, ancient energy, and profound isolation. It was a place a man seeking to shed his own humanity would feel at home. She flew on her Garchomp, the wind biting and cold as they ascended through the clouds. She found him near the summit, standing amidst the crumbling, time-worn ruins. He was not raging. He was not training for his next assault. He was perfectly still, watching his Greninja practice. The Pokémon moved with a silent, lethal grace, its blades of water carving through the thin air, each movement a study in deadly perfection. There was a quiet focus to the scene, a sense of peace that was more unsettling than any of his public rampages. This was Red in his natural state, stripped of his audience and his anger. Here, he was simply a master and his partner, honing their craft. Garchomp landed with a soft crunch on the frost-covered stone a respectful distance away. Red didn't startle. He had known she was coming. He finished the sequence with Greninja with a single, sharp nod, then recalled the Pokémon. He turned to face her, his obsidian eyes unreadable in the pale mountain light. Champion, he greeted, his voice a low rumble that seemed to be part of the mountain itself. The air is thin up here, Cynthia said, her own voice calm, conversational. It was not the opening of a confrontation, but an observation between equals. It's honest, he replied. It doesn't pretend to be anything other than what it is. He looked at her, his gaze sharp and analytical. You did not come here to arrest me. No, she confirmed, walking slowly toward him, her hands clasped behind her back. I came to understand. The ancient Sinnoh people believed this was the point where the world was born. A place of immense, chaotic power that was given order by Dialga and Palkia. She stopped, her eyes sweeping over the ruins. You remind me of that raw, chaotic power, Red. You have burst into our orderly world and started to shatter it. I want to know if you intend to create something new, or simply leave a void. Red was silent for a long moment, the wind whipping the edges of his cloak. Your order is a lie, he said finally. It is a comfortable, stagnant piece built on ego and tradition. It is a house with a rotten foundation. I am not shattering it. I am merely pushing on the walls to reveal the cracks that were already there. And the people you hurt, Misty, Clemont, are they just cracks to be exposed? A muscle in his jaw tightened. They are the ones who held the hammer that first broke the foundation. They have no right to complain when the walls start to fall. His pain was a palpable thing, a fortress of ice around him. But Cynthia could see the flicker of fire deep within. She decided to change tactics, to approach him not as a champion to a rogue, but as a trainer to a trainer. Your Greninja, she said, her tone softening with genuine admiration. The bond you share, the transformation, I have read the historical accounts, but to see its potential in person is something else entirely. They say Professor Sycamore was baffled by it. A power that manifests with no external energy source, just a perfect synchronization of will. For the first time since she had arrived, Red's expression shifted. The hard mask softened by a fraction of a degree. It is not about will, he corrected her, his voice losing some of its harsh edge. It is about trust, absolute, unconditional, the knowledge that you will never abandon them, and they will never abandon you. It is a bond you forge in fire, not in a classroom. They spent hours on that lonely peak, the world spread out below them like a map. They didn't argue, they spoke. She spoke of history, of the balance of the world, of her duty as a champion to protect it. He spoke of power, of potential, of the hypocrisy of those who claimed to be masters but were afraid of true strength. They shared a sparse meal of dried rations he offered and water from a canteen she carried. It was a strange, unspoken truce. He found her intellect to be as sharp and formidable as her reputation suggested. She listened without judgment, her gray eyes seeing not a monster, but a man who had been pushed past a terrible breaking point and had reforged himself in the pieces. A genuine, dangerous respect began to form between them. But as the sun began to dip towards the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and violet, the atmosphere on the peak began to change. The wind, which had been cold and honest, now carried a faint, discordant whisper on its currents. The ancient stones of the ruins seemed to hum with a low, malevolent energy. Red felt it first, a throbbing ache behind his eyes. On his shoulder, Pikachu's scarred eye twitched, and the small Pokémon let out a low, uneasy growl. Cynthia felt it too, a psychic chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. Her Garchomp, who had been resting peacefully, rose to its feet, its head fins twitching, a low growl rumbling in its chest as it scanned the empty sky. You feel it, Red stated, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the ruins. The shadow I told you about. It's strong here, Cynthia breathed, her hand instinctively going to a Pokeball on her belt. This place is a conduit for energy. It's amplifying it. The whispering grew louder, a chorus of faint, malicious voices that seemed to emanate from the stones themselves, speaking of doubt, of failure, of betrayal. It was an energy that preyed on the mind, and on the willpower. Your quest for revenge, Cynthia said, her voice tight as she fought against the unsettling psychic pressure. This anger you carry, it's like a beacon for this thing. You're feeding it. And your complacency is allowing it to grow in the shadows, he countered, though his words lacked their usual bite. He, too, was focused on the growing threat. You are all so busy polishing your thrones, you haven't noticed the rot spreading beneath them. The philosophical debate had reached its inevitable conclusion. Words were no longer enough. The tension between them, simmering for hours, finally ignited. Then show me, Cynthia challenged, her voice ringing with the authority of a champion. Show me this power you have gained. Prove to me that it is more than just a weapon for your own pain. A battle, here and now. Let our Pokémon speak the truth. Red looked at her, a fire lighting in his obsidian eyes. This was not a challenge born of ego or pride. It was a demand for proof, a trial by combat. He accepted. Pikachu. The small mouse leapt from his shoulder, landing nimbly on the cracked stone battlefield. The scars, the hardened eyes, the aura of contained power, it was a stark contrast to the cheerful companion he had once been. Cynthia nodded, her expression serious. She unclipped a Pokeball. Garchomp. Let's begin. Her land shark dragon stood opposite Pikachu, a titan of sand and fury. The difference in size was absurd. The difference in raw power, however, was another matter entirely. There was no referee, no timer. Just the silent understanding of two masters. Cynthia attacked first. Garchomp. Dragon Rush. Garchomp roared, its body enveloped in a surging, draconic blue aura as it charged, the very ground shaking with its speed. It was an attack of overwhelming force. Iron Tail. Red commanded calmly. The ground. Pikachu didn't try to meet the attack head-on. As Garchomp closed in, its tail began to glow with a metallic sheen. It spun, slamming its tail not into Garchomp, but into the ancient, crumbling stone floor. The impact, amplified by Pikachu's immense strength, sent a shockwave through the battlefield. A huge section of the stone tilted violently upwards, forming a makeshift ramp. Garchomp, unable to stop its charge, was launched into the air, its dragon rush careening harmlessly into the sky. Now, Red said, Volt Crash. Pikachu became a bolt of white-hot lightning, rocketing up the ramp and slamming into the airborne, defenseless Garchomp. The explosion of energy lit up the twilight on the mountain peak. But Garchomp was a champion's Pokémon. It roared in pain but twisted its body, using its fins to right itself and land heavily but safely on the stone. You are more than just power, Cynthia observed, a flicker of admiration in her eyes. Stone Edge. Garchomp slammed its claws into the ground, and pillars of sharpened rock erupted, racing towards Pikachu. The battle was a breathtaking display of speed versus power, strategy versus instinct. They used the crumbling ruins as their playground, ducking behind pillars, using broken walls for leverage. It was an even match, a dance of two perfectly attuned forces pushing each other to their absolute limits. Garchomp's raw strength was matched by Pikachu's impossible speed and Red's brilliant, unconventional tactics. They were locked in a stalemate, Pikachu dodging a brutal brick break, Garchomp shrugging off a powerful thunderbolt, when the whispering suddenly became a scream. The air itself seemed to tear open. From the very center of the ruins, a vortex of shimmering, distorted psychic energy erupted. Hovering in the center was a small, blue Pokémon. It should have been Azelf, the legendary being of willpower. But its eyes were not the clear, intelligent eyes of a guardian. They were glowing with a sick, purple light, its body contorted in agony, lashing out with waves of uncontrolled psychic power. The shadow had found the embodiment of will and had twisted it into a mindless puppet of rage. The corrupted legendary let out a psychic shriek that sent both Red and Cynthia stumbling back, clutching their heads. The battle was forgotten. Garchomp and Pikachu instantly ceased their hostilities, turning to face the new, far greater threat. It's being controlled. Cynthia yelled over the psychic gale. The shadow is using it as a weapon. Azelf fired a blast of pure, chaotic energy, a future sight attack unleashed with no charge time. It wasn't aimed at anything, it was an explosion of pain. It vaporized one of the ancient pillars, sending shards of stone flying. Fighting it directly will only destroy this place and exhaust our Pokémon. Cynthia analyzed, her champion's mind working under pressure. We need to break the shadow's hold on it, not defeat it. Red was already moving. Pikachu, agility, draw its fire. To Cynthia, he commanded, your Garchomp. Use its dig to create a distraction. We need an opening, a single moment where its psychic defenses are focused elsewhere. There was no hesitation. In the face of a true crisis, their rivalry evaporated, replaced by an instinctive, perfect synergy. Pikachu became a yellow blur, its movements erratic and unpredictable, drawing Azelf's wild psychic blasts. Garchomp dove into the stone floor, the ground rumbling as it moved beneath the surface, creating tremors that confused the maddened legendary. Azelf shrieked in frustration, its psychic energy flaring. It unleashed a massive psychic wave to flush Garchomp from the ground. For a single, critical second, its focus was diverted. Now, Red and Cynthia shouted in unison. Garchomp, Dragon Claw. Pikachu, Volt Tackle. Full power. It wasn't an attack on Azulf. Garchomp burst from the ground, its claws glowing, and slashed at the air beside Azulf, its attack shredding the purple, shadowy tendrils that were visibly clinging to the legendary's aura. At the same instant, Pikachu, shrouded in a blinding aura of electricity, did not crash into Azulf, but shot past it, its electrical field acting like a massive defibrillator, shocking the parasitic shadow energy. The effect was instantaneous. The purple glow in Azulf's eyes faded. The psychic storm ceased. The small legendary blinked, its mind its own again, and looked at its two saviors with an expression of profound, silent gratitude. With a final, faint chime, it vanished, retreating to the safety of its home. Silence returned to Spear Pillar, broken only by the whistling wind and the heavy breathing of two trainers and their Pokémon. The immediate threat was gone. The unspoken battle between them was over. Cynthia recalled her Garchomp, a weary but impressed look on her face. That, she said, her voice steady, was the shadow you spoke of. Red nodded, his gaze fixed on the spot where Azulf had vanished. Pikachu climbed weakly back onto his shoulder. It's getting stronger. It can corrupt beings of pure will. It's learning. Cynthia walked to his side, standing not as an opponent, but as an ally. Your path of revenge, your anger, it is a dinner bell for this entity. It will only make it stronger. She paused, then turned to look him in the eye. But your power, the bond you share with your Pokémon, I have never seen anything like it. It might be the only thing that can truly fight this thing. But you cannot do this alone. Your crusade will lead to the world's destruction. Red stood in silence, the weight of her words settling on him. He had set out to prove he was stronger than those who had betrayed him. But what if the true test of his strength wasn't about revenge? He looked at Cynthia, at the unwavering resolve in her eyes. She was not afraid. She was not judging him. She was offering a different path. A harder one. He gave a single, slow nod. I know. It was not an apology. It was not forgiveness. It was an acknowledgement. An acceptance that his war had just become much, much bigger than he had ever imagined. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Shadow's Hand. The descent from Spear Pillar was a silent one. The raw, world-altering energy of the battle had dissipated, leaving behind the profound quiet of the mountaintop and the fragile, unspoken accord between its two participants. Red moved with a sure-footed speed born of years in the wild, his cloak a slash of black against the snow. Cynthia followed, her Garchomp's powerful strides eating up the treacherous terrain with ease. The respect between them was no longer a nascent spark, it had been forged into something solid and real in the crucible of the fight against the corrupted Azulf. The dig site Brock was overseeing, Cynthia said, her voice clear in the thin air, breaking the long silence. The one from your lesson in Pewter City. The murals you described, that is our only lead to understanding the Shadow's history. Red grunted in assent, not slowing his pace. Brock is a scientist. He will still be there, trying to categorize a nightmare. He will have data. And what will you do when you see him? She asked, her gray eyes studying his rigid back. Offer another lesson. I will get what I need, he stated flatly. His feelings on the matter are irrelevant. Are they? Cynthia pressed gently. You fought alongside me to save Azulf. The instinct to protect is still in you, buried under years of anger. You cannot save the world if you are still at war with it. Red stopped, turning to face her. The wind whipped a strand of black hair across his face. Do not mistake necessity for a change of heart, champion. The Shadow is a threat that requires my full attention. When it is dealt with, my own war will resume. Do not forget that. Before Cynthia could reply, a sound cut through the wind. A high-pitched, mechanical whine that did not belong in the natural world. It grew louder, closer. A moment later, 3 sleek, black helicopters crested a nearby peak, their bodies emblazoned with a stark, crimson R. They moved with military precision, flanking the 2 trainers, their side doors sliding open to reveal squads of black-clad operatives armed with advanced capture technology. A voice, amplified and dripping with condescending amusement, boomed from the lead helicopter's external speakers. Red, a difficult man to find. And the lovely champion Cynthia. What an unexpected bonus. You've saved me a considerable amount of trouble by gathering together. Red's eyes narrowed. He recognized the voice. A voice of smoke-filled boardrooms and cold, calculated ambition. Giovanni. Team Rocket. Cynthia breathed, her hand moving to her Garchomp's side, the Pokémon already rumbling with a low growl. Newly reformed, refunded, and with a singular new purpose, Giovanni's voice continued. A high-definition screen lowered from the belly of his helicopter, displaying his face. He looked older, more refined, but his eyes held the same predatory glint. You see, Red, while you have been on your little crusade of personal vengeance, I have been studying those same ruins your friend Dr. Slate uncovered. My teams found them months ago. We have learned a great deal about the Whispering Shadow. A being of immense power, drawn to emotional turmoil. A being that can be harnessed. From the open doors of the other helicopters, elite Team Rocket grunts rappelled to the ground, deploying their Pokémon, a menacing line of powerful, fully evolved Machamp, Rhyperior, and Metagross. You seek to destroy it, Giovanni said with a dismissive chuckle. Such a lack of vision. I seek to control it. With its power, and with the unique energy signature you possess that seems to attract it, I will forge a new world order. Now, be a good asset and surrender. We have much to discuss. His ego is as large as ever, Cynthia murmured to Red. Red didn't reply. His focus was absolute. He analyzed the enemy positions, the types of their Pokémon, the trajectory of the setting sun. Take the right flank, he said to Cynthia, his voice a low command. Their Metagross are positioned to counter your Garchomp. Overwhelm them with speed before they can set up. Cynthia nodded, a grim smile on her face. And you? I'll take the left. There was no further discussion. They moved as one. Garchomp, Dragon Rush, Cynthia commanded. Her ace became a blue comet, streaking towards the line of steel-plated behemoths. Pikachu, Red said. Discharge. Pikachu leapt from his shoulder, and as it fell, it unleashed a massive, expanding dome of pure electricity. It wasn't aimed at any single Pokémon, but at the grunts themselves. Their high-tech capture devices sparked and short-circuited. Their communication systems filled with static. In a single move, he had blinded and deafened them. The battle was joined. It was chaos and synergy. Red and Cynthia fought back to back, a whirlwind of dragon fire and lightning. Red's Espeon created psychic barriers that deflected hyper beams, while Cynthia's Togekiss rained down devastating salvos of Aura Sphere. They were outnumbered 10-1, but their skill and the perfect, unspoken coordination between them made them an unstoppable force. Red would create an opening, and Cynthia would exploit it. She would lock down a target, and he would neutralize it. From his helicopter, Giovanni watched with a mixture of fury and fascination. Incredible, he murmured to himself. His bond truly is the key. He doesn't just command his Pokémon. He is his Pokémon. He raised a communicator to his lips. Phase 2. Deploy the asset. From the back of the largest helicopter, a heavy platform was lowered. On it stood a Rhyperior, but it was unlike any other. Its rocky hide was laced with pulsating purple veins of energy. A heavy, metallic collar was bolted around its neck, glowing with the same malevolent light as the corrupted Azulf. My scientists have found a way to synthesize the Shadow's energy, Giovanni announced, his voice filled with pride. A small, controlled dose. It heightens a Pokémon's aggression and power exponentially. I call it the Shadow-Clad Project. Let's see how you handle true, untamed power. The Shadow-Clad Rhyperior roared, a sound of pure agony and rage. It slammed its fists on the ground, and a stone-edge attack of unprecedented size erupted, the rock spires as thick as trees. Cynthia's Togekiss was struck and sent spiraling from the sky, knocked out in a single hit. Its power is off the charts, Cynthia yelled, recalling her fallen Pokémon. Garchomp, use Draco Meteor. Garchomp unleashed its ultimate attack, a volley of meteors raining down from the sky. They struck the Rhyperior in a series of massive explosions. When the smoke cleared, the beast was still standing, its purple veins glowing brighter, seemingly having absorbed the energy. Useless, Red growled. The shadow feeds on energy. You're just making it stronger. The tide of the battle had turned. The shadow-clad Rhyperior was a one-Pokémon army, smashing through their defenses, its power absolute and its mind gone. They were being pushed back, overwhelmed. Just as the Rhyperior raised its arm for a final, crushing rock wrecker, the roar of a different engine cut through the air. A battered, heavily modified jeep, clearly one of Brock's geological survey vehicles, came careening over a ridge, skidding to a halt. Brock was at the wheel, his face grim and determined. Beside him, Misty leaned out the passenger's side, a Gyarados' Pokeball already in her hand. "Looks like the party started without us," Misty yelled, trying for bravado but her eyes wide with fear at the sight of the monstrous Rhyperior. Brock didn't waste time on pleasantries. "The energy spike from your battle with the legendary was picked up by my equipment at the dig site. We followed the readings. That thing," he pointed a shaking finger at the Rhyperior, "it's resonating at the same frequency as the entity in the murals." Giovanni's laugh boomed from the speakers. The whole pathetic reunion, gathered in one place. "How touching. Finish them." "We can't overpower it," Cynthia shouted, her Garchomp struggling to dodge another attack. "Then we don't." Red's voice cut through the chaos, cold and absolute. He was now the unwilling commander of this chaotic force. "Brock, its movements are pure rage, no strategy. Find the flaw in its physical balance." "Misty, I need water. Not to attack, to create a surface. Now." Brock's analytical mind, shocked out of its fear, immediately kicked in. Its right leg, the energy infusion has made it overcompensate. It's putting all its weight on that leg before it strikes. "Gyarados, hydro pump. Flood the ground in front of it," Misty commanded, her confidence returning with a clear goal. A massive torrent of water shot from her Gyarados, turning the rocky ground into a slick, muddy field directly in the path of the charging Rhyperior. "Cynthia, Garchomp, pin its arms. Don't attack, just hold," Red ordered. Garchomp roared and charged, not with a glowing claw, but with its full body weight, grappling with the Rhyperior's massive arms, a heroic effort of pure strength. The Rhyperior, its mind consumed by rage, planted its right foot in the mud to deliver a point-blank horn drill. Its foot slipped. For a fraction of a second, its immense weight was off balance, its body tilted. It was the opening Red had been waiting for. "Pikachu, aim for the collar." Volt crash. There was no hesitation. Pikachu became a streak of pure, white-hot energy. It ignored the Rhyperior itself, its target the glowing, technological collar that was pumping the shadow's poison into its veins. The impact was not an explosion, but a sharp, piercing crack of focused power. The collar shattered. The purple energy engulfing the Rhyperior fizzled out. The light in its eyes faded from rage to confusion. Deprived of its artificial power source and exhausted from the battle, it swayed on its feet and collapsed, unconscious. Silence fell on the mountain. The remaining Team Rocket grunts stared in disbelief. Their ultimate weapon had been defeated. Giovanni, for the first time, looked furious. His gambit had failed. An impressive display of teamwork, he spat, his voice laced with venom. "No matter. The asset was a prototype. I already have what I truly came for." From the helicopter, a claw descended, not towards the battlefield, but towards the valley below, towards the location of the dig site. It pulled up a large, stone container, sealed with the same ancient, alien writing as the tomb. "The Keystone of Whispers," Giovanni announced. "The very artifact the ancients used to focus the shadow's energy. Thank you for distracting my competition while my ground team completed the acquisition. Our business here is concluded." With a final, contemptuous look, the helicopters turned and sped away, disappearing over the horizon. They had driven him off, but Giovanni had won. A tense, heavy silence settled over the four trainers and their exhausted Pokémon. They were a bizarre collection of broken friendships and new alliances, united only by the enemy who had just escaped. Brock finally broke the silence, pushing his glasses up. "We need to work together. He has the artifact from the tomb. We're the only ones who know what this is all about." Red turned his cold gaze on him, then on Misty. He looked at their tired, worried faces, then back at the darkening sky where Giovanni had vanished. He felt no warmth, no flicker of their old camaraderie, only the bitter taste of necessity. "This is a temporary truce," Red said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "We have a common enemy. That is all. This changes nothing between us." He turned and began walking down the mountain again, towards the violated tomb, towards the next piece of a puzzle he now had to share. Reluctantly, the others followed, a fractured, unlikely team marching into the heart of a gathering shadow. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Truth in the Ashes. The flight to Alola was a study in controlled tension. Cynthia had procured a private, unmarked jet through her lead connections, a sterile metal tube hurtling them across the ocean. Inside, the four of them were a collection of unstable elements, forced into proximity, the air thick with unspoken history. Misty sat staring out the window, watching the endless blue, her usual fiery energy banked into a quiet, nervous stillness. Brock had his laptop open, but he wasn't working. He was cycling through data from the MT Moon dig site, his face a mask of grim concentration, trying to find a scientific solution to a problem that defied science. Red sat alone, as far from the others as the cabin would allow. He was a pillar of silence, his cloak drawn around him, Pikachu a small, sleeping lump on his lap. He hadn't spoken a word since they had left Sinnoh. His eyes were fixed on the clouds below, but he wasn't seeing them. He was seeing the shattered collar on the Rhyperior, the triumphant sneer on Giovanni's face, the empty space in the earth where a keystone used to be. His personal war had been co-opted, his righteous crusade now just a footnote in a madman's scheme. The feeling was profoundly, infuriatingly dissatisfying. Cynthia was the fulcrum, the only thing keeping the fragile balance from shattering. She moved between them, offering Brock a cup of coffee, quietly discussing oceanic flight paths with Misty, and giving Red the space his coiled fury demanded. She was the diplomat, the leader, the only one looking at the entire board. "Professor Kukui is expecting us," she announced as the jet began its descent, the first glimpse of a lush, green island appearing through the clouds. "He's one of the world's leading experts on regional phenomena and Pokémon biology. If anyone in Alola can help us understand the nature of the Tapu Guardians, it's him." "Kukui," Brock murmured, the name pulling him from his data. "I've corresponded with him. Brilliant man. A bit eccentric." "Good." Red's voice was a low rasp, his first words in hours. "Eccentricity is better than dogma." As they stepped off the plane onto the tarmac of Mele Mele Island, the change in atmosphere was a physical blow. The air was warm, thick with humidity and the sweet, heavy scent of tropical flowers. The sun was a brilliant, benevolent thing, a stark contrast to the harsh light of the mountains. The air was alive with the cries of unfamiliar Pokémon. It was a world teeming with a vibrant, wild energy that Red's hardened senses found both distracting and strangely invigorating. Professor Kukui met them, a man whose boundless energy seemed to match the island's. He wore a lab coat, but it was open over board shorts and a bare chest, his greeting a hearty, "Alola. Cynthia and company, welcome to paradise." His smile faltered slightly as he took in the grim expressions of his guests, particularly the cloaked, intimidating figure who stood slightly apart from the others. "Whoa, yeah, judging by your faces, this isn't a vacation." In the cool, open-air setting of Kukui's beachfront lab, Cynthia laid out the situation. She spoke of the Whispering Shadow, the corrupted legendary, Giovanni's new Team Rocket, and the stolen keystone. Kukui listened, his easygoing demeanor slowly giving way to a look of deep, profound seriousness. "The Tapu," he said when she had finished, his voice low. "The guardian deities of our islands. They are ancient, powerful, and deeply connected to the life force of Alola. They're not the kind of Pokémon you just challenge to a battle. They are forces of nature. To speak with them, you'd need to earn an audience." He looked from face to face. "You'd need the help of the island kahuna." While Kukui made arrangements to contact Hala, the kahuna of Mele Mele Island, the others waited on a secluded stretch of sand behind the lab. The tropical sunset was a breathtaking explosion of orange, pink, and purple, but no one was watching it. The tension that had been simmering for the entire journey was about to boil over. It was Misty who broke the silence, her voice tight with a desperation she could no longer contain. She walked over to where Red stood, his back to them, watching the waves. "Ash," she said, using the name like a key she hoped would fit a lock that no longer existed. He didn't turn. "Look, what we did, back at Professor Oak's lab, it was the worst mistake of my life. Of our lives." Brock came to stand beside her, his expression pained. "She's right. Our intentions, they don't matter. The outcome was what mattered. We were arrogant. We thought we knew what was best for you, and we broke your trust. We are so sorry." The apology hung in the humid air, heartfelt and heavy. For a moment, Red was silent, the only sound the gentle lapping of the waves against the shore. Then, he turned. The look in his eyes was not the explosive rage they had expected. It was something far worse. It was a cold, vast emptiness, like the bottom of the ocean. "Sorry," he repeated, the word a dead thing on his tongue. "You think this is about my trust? You think your apology is what matters here?" He took a step towards them, and they instinctively recoiled from the sheer intensity of his presence. That day, your little intervention wasn't just a betrayal of a friend. It was a seismic event. The combined force of your broken bonds, your pity, your self-righteousness, it created an echo. A psychic wound in the fabric of the world. It was the dinner bell that woke the shadow from its slumber. It was the first crack in the prison wall. He stopped, his gaze pinning them in place. "So don't you dare stand there and apologize to me for my hurt feelings. You want to atone? Then you can start by apologizing to the world for the apocalypse you helped unleash." His words struck them with the force of a physical blow. He had taken their personal, painful mistake and reframed it as a global catastrophe. Their guilt was no longer just about hurting their friend, it was about endangering everything. It was a burden a simple, sorry, could never hope to lift. "Focus on the mission," Red said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. "Help me stop the thing you invited to the table. That is the only atonement I will accept." He turned his back on them again, the conversation over. Brock and Misty stood frozen, the beautiful Alolan sunset now feeling like the prelude to a coming firestorm. They had wanted forgiveness. He had given them a responsibility they could barely comprehend. Hala, the kahuna of Mele Mele Island, was a large man whose kind eyes seemed to hold the wisdom of generations. He met them at the entrance to the ruins of Conflict, the ancient trial site dedicated to Tapu Koko. He listened to their story, his gaze lingering on Red, sensing the maelstrom of power and pain that churned within him. "Tapu Koko is the guardian of this island," Hala said, his voice a deep, calming rumble. "It is fierce, fickle, and it does not suffer fools. To request its knowledge is to request a trial. It will test not your power, but your spirit, your unity." He glanced at the visible friction between Red and the others. "This will be your greatest challenge." He led them into the heart of the ruins. The air grew thick, buzzing with an almost tangible electrical energy. In the central chamber, a totem stood, ancient and weathered. "Present yourselves," Hala instructed. "Show the guardian your purpose." As they stepped forward, the air cracked with ozone. A being of yellow and black, a primal force of lightning and instinct, materialized before them. Tapu Koko. Its eyes, sharp and intelligent, fixed on them, and a powerful psychic wave washed over their minds. The world dissolved. They were no longer in the ruins. They were on a crumbling, abstract battlefield, facing an illusionary, nightmarish version of Giovanni's shadow-clad Rhyperior. A test, Cynthia realized. It wants to see how we fight together. The illusion charged. It was a perfect recreation of their fear. "I'll draw its fire," Misty yelled, her Gyarados appearing and unleashing a torrent of water. "Its leg," Brock shouted, his scientific mind taking over. "Focus on its right leg." But their attacks were disjointed. Their timing was off. Red fought with his own silent, brutal efficiency, ignoring their shouted strategies. The illusionary Rhyperior smashed through their defenses, its attacks landing with crushing psychic force. They were losing. "You're not fighting it, you're fighting each other," Cynthia's voice cut through their panic. "Your resentment, your guilt, your pride. It can feel it. We have to trust each other, right now, or we fail." Her words struck a chord. Misty looked at Red, not with fear, but with a new determination. "Red, your Pikachu is the only one fast enough. Tell me where you need an opening." Red glanced at her, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. He saw not the girl from his past, but a capable, determined strategist. He made a decision. "Brock, your Onyx. Bind its legs. Don't crush, just hold. On it," Brock yelled, his Onyx erupting from its Pokeball to grapple with the beast. "Misty, Ice Beam. The ground beneath it. Cynthia, your Garchomp." A diversion from above. Commands flew, not as separate strategies, but as a single, unified plan, orchestrated by the one they had wronged. They moved as one. The Onyx held, the ground froze, the Garchomp distracted, and in the single second of opportunity they created, Red gave the final order. Pikachu. The neck. Volt tackle. The attack struck the illusion's weak point, and the psychic construct shattered, the world of the ruins snapping back into place around them. They were panting, exhausted, but they were standing together. Tapu Koko floated before them, its head cocked. It had seen what it needed to see. It floated towards Red, its shield-like arms closing. It reached out a single, sharp claw and touched the center of his forehead. The world did not dissolve. It exploded. Red was thrown into a chaotic vortex of time and memory. He saw flashes of an ancient, primordial world. He saw trainers unlike any he had ever known, their bonds with their Pokémon so strong they fought as one being. He saw them leading an army of legendary Pokémon, the Tapis in their prime, colossal beings of light that he barely recognized as Solgaleo and Lunala, against a shapeless, consuming darkness. The Whispering Shadow. He saw them fighting a losing battle, until the ancient trainers used the keystone to focus their own life force, their own bonds, into a final, desperate attack that did not destroy the shadow, but sealed it away in a prison between worlds. The price of their victory was their own lives. The vision slammed forward into the future. It was a horrifying montage of the world's end. He saw the golden skyscrapers of Saffron City crumble into black dust. He saw the Prism Tower, the beacon of Lumiose, dissolve like sugar in water. He saw the wild Pokémon of the forests fleeing from a creeping tide of absolute nothingness that consumed everything it touched. He saw the faces of his friends, of Cynthia, twisted in a silent, final scream as their light was extinguished. Then, the vision turned inward. It showed him that day in Professor Oak's lab. It showed the moment of betrayal not as a memory, but as an event of cosmic significance. A soundless psychic scream that echoed across dimensions, creating a hairline crack in the shadow's ancient prison. The vision then followed his journey. His rage-fueled victory over Misty. His cold dismantling of Brock's science. The humiliation of May. With every act of vengeance, with every surge of his immense, negative, rage-fueled power, the crack in the prison widened. The final image was the most horrifying of all. He saw the prison, now covered in a web of fractures. He saw his own aura, a burning, dark red energy, coalescing into the shape of a key. And he saw himself, driven by his quest for ultimate power, inserting that key into the prison's final lock and turning it. The vision ended. He saw the shadow, free and whole, turn its formless, terrifying attention to him. And in the dead silence of the void, he felt its gratitude. Red collapsed to his knees in the real world, gasping, sweat pouring down his face. The connection broke. Tapu Koko let out a single, somber cry, a sound of warning, of pity, and then vanished, leaving behind only the buzzing, electric silence of the ruins. The others had seen flashes of it, disjointed images of horror reflected through the Tapu's power. They stared at Red, their faces pale with shock. He knelt on the cold stone floor, his head bowed. He had set out to become the most powerful trainer in the world to prove them all wrong. And he had succeeded. He had become so powerful that his very existence was now the key to the world's destruction. The ultimate, bitter irony. His strength, his rage, his entire identity, was the weapon that would arm his greatest enemy. He was trapped. To continue his crusade was to doom the world. To stop was to let the betrayal that had defined him go unanswered. Cynthia stepped forward, her heart aching at the sight of his broken posture. She knelt in front of him, but she said nothing. There were no words for this. There was only the terrible, crushing weight of the truth in the ashes of his former life. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The Siege of the Sun and Moon. The return flight from Alola was a journey through a dead, silent world. The Tapu's revelation had shattered their fractured alliance and replaced it with a shared, suffocating dread. The truth was a poison. Red's power, his rage, his entire being, was the final key. Giovanni's plan was no longer about controlling the shadow, it was about provoking Red into a state of ultimate power, forcing him to turn the key and unlock the prison for him. The stolen keystone was not a weapon, it was a catalyst, a tool to amplify and focus the coming cataclysm. Red sat apart, a figure carved from stone, the vortex of the prophecy. He was a living weapon, aimed at the heart of the world, and his enemies and his former friends were all pushing him toward the target. He felt a profound, chilling sense of helplessness that was more terrifying than any battle he had ever fought. For the first time since that day in Pallet Town, he didn't know what to do. His singular, driving purpose, revenge, was now a suicide pact with reality itself. It was Cynthia who charted their course, her mind a beacon of clarity in the encroaching darkness. "The altar of the sun and moon," she stated, her voice cutting through the heavy silence as she pointed to a location on a holographic map of Alola. "It's on Pony Island, a place of immense celestial and dimensional energy. The ancient texts from the Pewter ruins described it as the locus, the point where the veil between worlds is thinnest. If Giovanni wants to use the keystone to force a dimensional breach, that is where he will do it." As if summoned by her words, every screen in the jet suddenly flickered to life. It wasn't a hack, it was a global broadcast. Giovanni's face appeared, no longer sneering from a helicopter, but calm, poised, broadcasting from a place of immense, ancient power. Behind him, the keystone of whispers floated, pulsating with a sickly purple light, held in a containment field at the center of a massive stone altar. The sky behind him was a bruised, unnatural twilight, even though it should have been midday in Alola. "People of the world," Giovanni began, his voice smooth and commanding. "For too long, you have lived in a stagnant peace, governed by fallible champions and naive ideals. A new era is dawning. An era of true, absolute power. I am here, at this sacred place, to unlock the door to our future." The camera panned out, revealing the altar was surrounded by a full army of Team Rocket forces, their Pokémon, Tyranitar, Metagross, Salamence, all bearing the faint, pulsating purple veins of the shadow-clad enhancement. But that wasn't the most terrifying part. The sky above the altar was shimmering, tearing. From these shimmering rifts, things were beginning to emerge. The sleek, bamboo-like form of a Kartana. The muscular, mosquito-like silhouette of a Buzzwole. The elegant, spectral shape of a Pheromosa. Ultra beasts. Dozens of them, drawn by the dimensional disturbance, their alien cries echoing in the unnatural twilight. "The dimensional walls are already weakening," Brock breathed, his face pale. "He's using the keystone to create a cascade failure." The broadcast cut to a final, chilling image. Giovanni held up a device, a detonator. "And to my unwilling partner, Red," he said, a cold smile touching his lips. "I have placed a series of seismic charges at the base of the Mele Mele, Akala, and Ula Ula volcanoes. Unless you come to me here, at the altar, and give me the battle I know you are capable of, I will sink this entire archipelago into the sea. Your move, hero." The broadcast ended. The choice had been made for him. It was a perfect trap. If he didn't show, millions would die. If he did show, and fought with the full extent of his power, the world would die. They landed on Pony Island amidst chaos. The sky was a swirling vortex of purple and black. The earth trembled with distant, volcanic rumblings. The air was thick with the cries of rampaging ultra beasts and the terrified screams of the island's few inhabitants. It was a war zone. As they disembarked, they were met by the 4 island kahunas, their faces etched with grim resolve. Hala, Olivia, Nanu, and Hapu. With them were Professor Kukui and, to Red's surprise, a small army of Alola's most powerful trainers, including the young champion himself, a boy with a determined look and a Decidueye at his side. "We saw the broadcast," Hala said, his voice a low growl that held no trace of its previous warmth. "Alola will not fall without a fight. We will hold back the beasts and Giovanni's ground forces. It is our duty. Your duty," he looked directly at Red, "is at the summit." Red looked at the assembled force, at the trainers preparing to defend their home against an otherworldly invasion. He saw the fear in their eyes, but he also saw courage. He saw the very thing he had accused the world of lacking, a genuine, selfless desire to protect. The plan was simple, desperate. The kahunas and the Alolan trainers would engage the main force at the base of the vast Pony Canyon, a brutal holding action to buy them time. Red, Cynthia, Brock, and Misty would fight their way through the elite guard and ascend to the altar itself to confront Giovanni. The ascent was a nightmare. The canyon path was a gauntlet of shadow-clad Pokémon, their power unnatural, their attacks relentless. They fought as a unit, the memory of the Tapu's trial still fresh. Brock's Steelix formed a living wall against a barrage of hyper beams. Misty's Gyarados created a whirlpool in a narrow gorge, sweeping away a squad of Metagross. Cynthia's Garchomp was a whirlwind of destruction, a dragon of righteous fury. And Red was something else entirely. He fought with a terrible, restrained efficiency. He knew that every surge of his power, every flicker of his rage, was feeding the enemy. So he held back. He used strategy over strength, precision over power. His Espeon created psychic illusions, turning Team Rocket squads against each other. His Snorlax, using its immense bulk, created roadblocks and triggered landslides, blocking reinforcements. He was a general, not a warrior, his commands crisp and clear, his mind a cold, calculating machine. But as they neared the summit, the resistance stiffened. Giovanni's elite admins, a trio of ruthless trainers, blocked their path. It was a choke point, a place they could not bypass. "Go," Cynthia said to Red, her Lucario already moving to intercept one of the admins. "We'll handle them. You are the only one who can face Giovanni." "We'll hold this line," Misty declared, her Starmie glowing with psychic power. Brock stood beside her, his Crobat a blur of motion. "This is our atonement. Now go do your part." Red hesitated for a fraction of a second. He looked at them, not as the traitors from his past, but as the trainers they were now, willingly placing themselves in the path of incredible danger for his sake. For the world's sake. He saw the trust in their eyes, a trust he had not seen directed at him in years. He gave a single, sharp nod, and ran. He reached the summit alone. The altar of the sun and moon was a scene from a madman's dream. Giovanni stood at its center, basking in the sickly purple light of the keystone, the sky above him a swirling vortex of tearing space-time. His personal guard of 6 shadow-clad Pokémon, a terrifying collection of pseudo-legendaries, stood ready. "You came," Giovanni said, his voice calm, almost conversational. "I knew you would. The hero's complex is a difficult thing to bury, isn't it?" "This ends now, Giovanni," Red growled, his hand tightening on a Pokeball. "Oh, it is just beginning," Giovanni replied with a serene smile. "But you are not giving me what I want, Red. I can feel it. You're holding back. Your power is throttled, your rage is caged. This isn't the man who humiliated the Kanto elite. This is a coward." He gestured to the swirling vortex above. "I need the key, Red. I need your rage, and I will have it." He raised his hand. From behind the altar, 2 figures were dragged forward by a pair of grunts. Serena and Clement. They were bruised, captured during the chaos in Lumiose, and held as a final, cruel piece of insurance. "No," Red breathed, his blood running cold. "I had them brought here for this very occasion," Giovanni said smoothly. "I find that emotional attachment is such a potent catalyst for one's true potential. Now, you will give me the battle I require, or you can watch while my shadow-clad Tyranitar erases them from existence. The choice is yours." Clement stared at Red, his face a mask of terror and defiant resolve. "Don't do it, Ash. It's what he wants." Serena's eyes met his, and in them, he saw not fear, but a desperate, pleading trust. The same trust she had shown him on that bridge in Lumiose. She was not asking him to save her. She was asking him to save himself. But Giovanni had miscalculated. He had assumed Red's only trigger was rage. He had built his entire plan on the idea that to save his friends, Red would have to become a monster. He had not accounted for the boy who once was. He had not accounted for Ash Ketchum. Red looked at Clement's defiance. He looked at Serena's unwavering faith. He looked back at the battle raging down the canyon, where Brock and Misty were holding the line. He saw the faces of all the people who had, in their own flawed way, cared for him. The betrayal, the anger, the years of cold, hard vengeance, they suddenly felt small, insignificant, in the face of this. He had been so focused on their one act of betrayal that he had forgotten the 1,000 acts of friendship that had come before it. He had let his pain define him, blind him. And that blindness was about to destroy the world. A profound, shattering clarity washed over him. The whispering shadow fed on negative emotions. Rage, hate, vengeance. But what was the opposite of that? What was the one thing he had abandoned on his quest for power? Trust, hope, love, the bond he shared with his Pokémon. Not the cold, symbiotic, battle-hardened bond of Red, but the warm, laughing, unconditional bond of Ash. He let go. He let go of the anger. He let go of the pain. He let go of the cold, hard shell of red that he had built around his heart. For the first time in years, he reached out not with his will, but with his heart. He felt his Pokémon respond, not with the sharp focus of soldiers answering a command, but with a wave of warmth, of relief, of joy. Pikachu leapt onto his shoulder, nuzzling his cheek, a gesture he had not made since before the betrayal. Greninja, Espeon, Charizard, he could feel all of them, a chorus of unwavering loyalty in his soul. The aura around him changed. The dark, burning crimson that the shadow craved flickered and died. In its place, a new light began to glow. A soft, brilliant gold. It was not the energy of rage. It was the energy of a pure, unbreakable bond. Giovanni stared, his confident smile faltering. What is this? This is not the power I was promised. The keystone of whispers began to vibrate violently, the pure, positive energy acting like a poison to its dark nature. The vortex in the sky wavered, the connection to the shadow weakening. You wanted my power, Giovanni. Red said, his voice no longer the cold rasp of a wraith, but the clear, steady voice of a true master. You're about to get it. The battle for the world was not going to be won with rage. It was going to be won with hope. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. The Dawn of a New Era. The golden light emanating from Red was not a weapon. It was an answer. It pulsed with a gentle, indomitable warmth that was the antithesis of the shadow's cold, parasitic hunger. The keystone of whispers, which had been drawing power from the tearing sky, now recoiled from this pure energy, its purple glow flickering and sputtering like a dying ember. The very air around the altar, once thick with dread, now felt clean, breathable. Giovanni stared, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. His perfect, logical trap, built on the predictable nature of rage and revenge, had failed. The key had changed in the lock. No, he roared, a sound of pure, frustrated ambition. This is not how it ends. I will not be denied by a child's sentimental epiphany. He slammed his fist onto the containment field control panel, shattering it. The field around the keystone collapsed. With a guttural cry of desperation and defiance, Giovanni plunged his hands into the swirling, dark energy of the artifact. If you will not give me the key, he snarled, his voice distorting, deepening, then I will become the door. The shadow's energy, raw and undiluted, surged into him. His body convulsed, lifted from the ground. His skin turned a deathly pale, laced with the same pulsating, purple-black veins as his shadow-clad Pokémon. His eyes dissolved into pools of pure, malevolent shadow. A wave of absolute terror washed out from him, a psychic scream that was felt by every living thing on the island. The whispering shadow, denied its chosen vessel, had taken its most willing one. Giovanni, the master of control, had become a puppet. The being that was once Giovanni floated above the altar, its form wreathed in tendrils of shadow. The rift in the sky above pulsed in unison with it, a direct conduit of its power. We are, its voice boomed, a chorus of 1,000 whispering echoes speaking as one. At last, we are free. Red did not flinch. He stood his ground, his golden aura a shield against the wave of despair. Pikachu was on his shoulder, a beacon of defiant light. He felt, rather than saw, the others arrive at the summit behind him. Cynthia, Brock, Misty, Clemont, and Serena, their battles won, they were here to witness the final act. You are not free, Red said, his voice clear and steady. You are a parasite, and your host is about to be evicted. The shadow Giovanni laughed, a sound that cracked the very stones of the altar. Your light is an anomaly. A flicker. It cannot burn away the darkness that is eternal. It raised a hand, and a bolt of pure, uncreation, a spear of black energy that seemed to absorb the light around it, shot towards Red. Before Red could even issue a command, a massive, bulky form moved with impossible speed. Snorlax. It appeared in front of him, its arms crossed, taking the full force of the attack. The dark energy washed over it, and the giant Pokémon grunted, staggering back, but it did not fall. Its own simple, pure life force, amplified by Red's golden aura, was a bulwark against the void. It can't be destroyed by force. Cynthia yelled, her strategic mind piecing together the vision from the Tapu. The ancients could only seal it. Red knew. The vision had shown him the way. This wasn't a battle of attrition. It was an exorcism. We're not here to destroy it, he called back, his eyes locked on the possessed Giovanni. We're here to heal the wound. He reached for his belt, unclipping 5 pokey balls. It's time, he whispered. Together, all of us. In a simultaneous flash of light, his team appeared, forming a semicircle around him. Charizard, its flame now burning with a golden-white intensity. Sceptile, its leaf blades humming with the pure energy of the wild. Feraligatr, its scales shimmering with the power of the deep ocean. Venusaur, its great flower glowing with the life force of the earth. And Greninja, a silent warrior of shadow and water, now wreathed in a gentle, cleansing mist. The shadow Giovanni paused, its empty eyes surveying the team. It could feel it. Each Pokémon was a different note, a different frequency of the same pure, positive energy. This was not an army. It was an orchestra. The foolish hope of mortals. It will be your undoing. It shrieked, unleashing a wave of dark power that rippled across the summit, causing the remaining shadow-clad Pokémon to roar and charge at the assembled group. We'll hold them off, Clemont shouted, his Luxray moving to intercept a charging Tyranitar. Give Ash the time he needs. The battle for the summit erupted. While Cynthia's Garchomp and Misty's Gyarados held back the rampaging Ultra Beasts, Brock, Clemont, and Serena and their partners formed a defensive line, fighting with a desperate courage against Giovanni's enhanced guard. They were no longer fighting for atonement. They were fighting for their friend. For their world. Red closed his eyes, ignoring the chaos around him. He wasn't the commander anymore. He was the conductor. He reached out with his golden aura, not to push, but to connect. He felt the fiery passion of Charizard, the unyielding spirit of Sceptile, the deep calm of Feraligatr, the nurturing life of Venusaur, the silent loyalty of Greninja, and the unwavering friendship of Pikachu. He wove their 6 distinct energies together, harmonizing them into a single, resonant chord of pure, life-affirming power. Now, he said, his eyes snapping open. They glowed with the same golden light. The attack was not a beam. It was not an explosion. It was a wave of harmonic resonance that washed over the entire summit. It did not destroy, it cleansed. The ground it touched sprouted with small, glowing flowers. The dark energy it met sizzled and evaporated like mist in the morning sun. It struck the possessed Giovanni. The entity shrieked, a sound of pure agony, not from pain, but from incompatibility. The golden energy did not burn it, it starved it, severing its connection to the negative emotions it fed on. At the same time, the wave surged upwards, a pillar of pure, golden light, striking the heart of the dimensional rift. It did not force the tear shut, it healed it, weaving the frayed edges of reality back together. The shadow's hold on Giovanni shattered. The black tendrils dissolved, the purple veins faded, and with a final, echoing whisper of rage, the entity was forced back through the ceiling rift, its anchor to this world gone. Giovanni, pale and unconscious, fell to the stone floor of the altar. The sky above shimmered, the last vestiges of the vortex knitting themselves shut, replaced by the natural, deep blue of the Alolan sky. The keystone of whispers, its dark energy expended, crumbled into gray dust. As the golden light faded, a profound silence fell over the altar of the sun and moon. The remaining shadow-clad Pokémon swayed, the malevolent energy gone, leaving only exhaustion. The Ultra Beasts, their gateway home now closed, looked around in confusion before retreating into the island's vast wilderness. The battle was over. The Kahunas and the Alolan trainers arrived at the summit to find a scene of quiet victory. They took the unconscious Giovanni and his remaining forces into custody. There were no grand speeches, no victory parades. Just the shared, weary relief of a world pulled back from the brink. Red stood amidst his Pokémon, the golden aura faded, leaving him looking tired, human. He turned to face the others. Brock, Misty, Clemont, Serena. They stood a short distance away, their faces a mixture of awe, relief, and a deep, unspoken remorse. No words were needed. An apology would have been too small, forgiveness too simple. In the shared crucible of the world's near end, they had found a different kind of resolution. He looked at them, and for the first time in years, he did not see his betrayers. He saw his friends. He offered a small, tired, but genuine smile. And in that smile, the war he had been fighting within himself was finally over. Sometime later, the wind on MT. Silver was still a razor, but it no longer felt like a companion. The world's highest peak was no longer a throne of bitter isolation. It was just a place with a good view. Ash stood on the summit, his dark cloak replaced by a familiar, practical jacket. He was watching the sun rise, a brilliant explosion of color that promised a new day. He was not alone. "It's peaceful up here," Cynthia said, coming to stand beside him. "I can see why you chose it." "It was quiet," Ash replied, his voice calm, the rasp of red gone completely. "I needed quiet to hear myself think. Turns out I was listening to the wrong thoughts." He looked at her, his eyes no longer the cold obsidian of a vengeful spirit, but the warm, brown eyes of a man who had walked through the darkest parts of himself and had come out the other side. He had immense, world-altering power at his command, a power now balanced not by rage, but by peace. "What now?" she asked. "The world thinks Red has vanished. Ash Ketchum is a memory. You can be anyone you want to be." He turned his gaze back to the sunrise, to the vast world spread out beneath them. A world he had almost broken. A world he had saved. A world full of new challenges, new adventures. Pikachu hopped onto his shoulder, nuzzling his cheek, its scarred eye no longer a mark of pain, but a badge of survival. "I think," he said, a real, easy smile spreading across his face, "for the first time in a long time, I'm just going to be me." He looked at Cynthia, at the brilliant, formidable, and beautiful woman who had seen the man behind the monster. She smiled back, her own future as a champion now seeming wonderfully, thrillingly unpredictable. Together, they watched the dawn break, ready to face a new era, not as champions or outcasts, but as partners, standing at the top of the world, with a brand new day stretching out before them. Chapter 10 End.